When Maylene Joe stepped off that stagecoach in Ash Creek, blood still drying under her fingernails from clawing at locked doors during the 3-week journey west, she made herself 2 promises: never beg again, and never let another man's fists write her story. The frontier town went silent as she limped past the saloon, her silk dress torn at the hem, bruises painting her arms in shades of purple and yellow. What happened next would shake this dusty settlement to its bones. Stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The trouble with running from your past is that it teaches you to see threats everywhere. Maylene learned this standing on the platform of the Ash Creek coach station, gripping a carpet bag that held everything she owned. 2 changes of clothes, a jade bracelet her mother had pressed into her palm before the fever took her, and a marriage contract she'd signed in San Francisco without reading because the alternative was worse. The afternoon sun hit her face like an open palm, and she swayed on feet that had forgotten how to balance without the constant rocking of wheels beneath them. Easy now. The voice came from her left, low, careful, the kind of tone you'd use approaching a spooked horse. She flinched anyway, couldn't help it. 3 years of living under Wen Zhao's roof had rewired her instincts. Every unexpected sound meant danger. Every shadow might hide a closed fist. But the man who'd spoken didn't move closer. He just stood there, hat in hand, waiting. Tall, maybe 40, with sun-weathered skin and eyes the color of creek water after rain. Dust covered his boots and the legs of his worn denim pants. Working clothes. Honest dirt. "Miss Joe?" he said. "I'm Rowan Hale." The name from the letters. The man she'd agreed to marry sight unseen because a Chinese woman alone in San Francisco had exactly 3 options: marry, starve, or worse. The marriage broker had called Rowan Hale a decent man, a rancher, a widower looking for companionship rather than decoration. Maylene had stopped listening after decent. In her experience, men who called themselves decent were usually the cruelest. She managed a nod, not trusting her voice yet. The stagecoach driver heaved her trunk down from the roof, and Rowan stepped forward to catch it before it hit the ground. His sleeve rode up as he moved, and Maylene's breath caught. No rings. His wrists bore the marks of rope and weather and hard work, but no rings. Wen Zhao had worn 3 on each hand, heavy gold things he'd twist before he struck. "Got a wagon just over there," Rowan said, gesturing toward a sturdy-looking rig hitched to 2 horses. "Ranch is about an hour's ride north. We can get you settled before dark if we don't dawdle." Maylene stepped down from the platform, and pain shot through her right ankle, the one Wen had kicked during their last argument, the one that hadn't healed right because he'd locked her in her room for 2 days afterward, and she couldn't walk to fetch ice. She bit down hard on the inside of her cheek to keep from making a sound, but her body betrayed her. Her leg buckled. Rowan's hand shot out, catching her elbow before she fell. The touch was brief, impersonal, released the moment she regained her balance. But her sleeve had shifted. His eyes dropped to the bruises circling her forearm. Purple-black fingerprints, 4 on top and 1 underneath where a thumb had dug in. They were a week old, starting to yellow at the edges. She had others, ribs, shoulder, the small of her back. But these were the visible ones, the evidence she couldn't hide. Rowan's jaw tightened. He looked away deliberately, giving her the dignity of pretending he hadn't seen. When he spoke again, his voice had gone quieter, more careful. "Ankle hurt?" "I can walk." "Didn't ask if you could. Asked if it hurt." The distinction caught her off guard. Wen had only ever cared what she could do, never how it felt to do it. She studied Rowan's face for signs of anger or impatience and found neither. Just patience. Waiting. "Yes," she said finally. "It hurts." He nodded once, like she'd confirmed something he'd suspected. "Wagon's got good springs. You can rest it on the ride. I'll get your trunk loaded." He moved away then, hoisting her belongings like they weighed nothing, and Maylene allowed herself 1 full breath. Around them, Ash Creek conducted its late afternoon business. Men emerged from the saloon across the street, pausing to stare. A woman sweeping the porch of the general store stopped mid-stroke to watch. 2 children playing in the dirt pointed and whispered. Chinese. That's what they saw. Not the bruises, not the limp, not the exhaustion painted in the hollows beneath her eyes. Just Chinese, which in most frontier towns meant doesn't belong. Maylene lifted her chin and stared back. Let them look. She'd crossed an ocean and half a continent. She'd survived things that would make these people's nightmares look tame. Their stares couldn't hurt her anymore. Ready when you are. Rowan had positioned the wagon so she could step up from the boardwalk instead of the street, minimizing how high she'd need to climb. Another small kindness he probably didn't think twice about, but that landed like water on parched ground. She settled onto the bench seat, arranging her skirts, and he climbed up beside her. Not too close, leaving a respectful gap between them. The horses started forward at his gentle command, and Ash Creek began sliding past. The town wasn't much. One main street lined with the standard frontier assortment of businesses, wooden buildings that looked like they'd been thrown up quickly and painted never. But it had a certain honesty to it. No pretense, just survival. They rode in silence for the first 20 minutes, leaving the town behind. The landscape opened up into rolling grassland, broken occasionally by stands of cottonwood and the distant line of mountains cutting across the western horizon. Big sky country. Maylene had never seen so much emptiness. "You get enough to eat on the journey?" Rowan asked eventually. "Yes?" "Good. Ranch food's simple, but there's plenty of it. Got a woman comes in twice a week to help with cooking and cleaning. Sarah Brennan, nice lady. Talks a lot but means well. She'll likely want to teach you American cooking if you're interested." Maylene absorbed this information. A ranch with hired help meant he had some success, some stability. And he was telling her about it rather than laying down rules. "No, you'll do this," or "I expect that." Just information, offered like she might have opinions about it. "You don't have to decide anything right now," Rowan continued, eyes on the road. "I know this is probably all strange and overwhelming. Contract says we're married, but far as I'm concerned, paper doesn't mean much if two people don't agree to what it says. You'll have your own room, your own space. Nobody's going to force anything." Her hands tightened on her carpet bag. "The contract says I paid your passage and broker fee, which I did. Says you agreed to marriage, which you did. Doesn't say a damn thing about what kind of marriage that has to be." He glanced at her briefly, then back to the road. "I'm not looking for property, Miss Joe. Had a wife once. Loved her. Lost her to cholera 5 years back. Been lonely since, but I'm not so desperate I'd trap someone into something they don't want." "Then why bring me here at all?" It was the first real question she'd asked, and it seemed to surprise him. His mouth quirked, not quite a smile, but something adjacent to it. "Because I liked your letters," he said simply. "Because you wrote about missing the smell of jasmine tea and the sound of rain on tile roofs, and I figured anyone who missed things that specific must have loved something once. Seemed like a person worth knowing." He paused. "Also, the broker mentioned you were in a difficult situation. Seemed wrong to leave you there if I could offer a way out." Maylin turned to stare at him fully. "You don't know me." "No, but I figure that goes both ways. We can take time to figure out if we suit. No rush." The wagon hit a rut, jostling them, and pain flared in her ankle again. She must have made some small sound because Rowan immediately slowed the horses. "Bad?" "It's fine." "You keep saying that." His tone held no judgment, just observation. "But I'm starting to think your version of fine covers a lot of territory." He wasn't wrong. Maylene had learned to function through pain so long ago, she'd almost forgotten what absence of it felt like. Broken ribs, split lips, bruised organs. She'd worked through all of it because Wen expected dinner on time regardless of whether he'd spent the afternoon using her for target practice. "There's a doctor in town," Rowan said, "if you want it looked at properly. Or Sarah's got a good hand with liniment and wrapping. She helped me through a broken ankle 2 winters back." "I don't need—" Maylene stopped herself. Pride was a luxury she couldn't afford. "I would appreciate the liniment, thank you." "Good." He kept the horses to a steady, easy pace, avoiding the worst of the ruts. "Ranch will be coming up over that next rise. Want to warn you, it's not fancy. Working cattle operation. Everything's built for function over form." The ranch house appeared as they crested the hill, and Maylene felt something in her chest loosen slightly. Rowan had undersold it. The house was solid, 2 stories, painted white with dark green shutters, a wide porch wrapping around the front and side. Not palatial, but well-maintained, loved. Behind it spread a collection of outbuildings, barn, stable, bunkhouse, what looked like a smokehouse. Cattle dotted the pastures in the distance, and she could hear chickens complaining from somewhere near the barn. It looked like a place people actually lived, not just survived. A man emerged from the barn as they pulled up, older, weathered, moving with the careful precision of someone whose joints didn't bend quite right anymore. He raised a hand in greeting. "That's Tom," Rowan said. "Foreman. Been here longer than I have. Came with the property when I bought it. Good man." Tom approached as Rowan set the brake, his eyes taking in Maylene with the same careful assessment a horse trader might give new stock. But when he spoke, his voice was respectful. "Ma'am, welcome. Rowan treat you decent on the ride?" "Yes, thank you." "Good. He forgets his manners sometimes, but usually means well." Tom's mouth twitched. "Got your room ready upstairs. Sarah came by yesterday to air it out and put fresh linens on the bed. If you need anything, just holler." Rowan had already moved to unload her trunk. Maylene started to stand, testing her ankle, and discovered the hour of rest had helped, but not solved the problem. She made it down from the wagon under her own power, but barely. "I'll take this up," Rowan said, shouldering her trunk. "Tom, can you show Miss Jo where the kitchen is? She probably wants water." They were doing it again, making decisions about what she needed, moving around her like she was an object to be positioned. Maylene opened her mouth to protest, then caught the look passing between Rowan and Tom. Not dismissive, worried. They'd both seen the limp, the bruises, the exhaustion she couldn't quite hide. They were trying to help. That was new. She followed Tom inside, taking in details. Clean floors, simple furniture built for durability, windows that actually opened for air. The kitchen was large and practical, dominated by a cast-iron stove that looked well used. Tom poured her water from a pitcher, the glass clean and cold. "Rowan mentioned you're hurt," he said carefully. "Sarah can take a look when she comes tomorrow, but if it's serious, Doc Harrison in town is good people. Won't judge." Maylene drank half the glass before responding. "It's healing, but still hurts." "Yes." Tom nodded, accepting this. "Then we'll get it looked at proper. No use suffering when there's help available." He studied her face. "Listen, I don't know your story and won't ask unless you want to tell it, but I've seen enough of life to know when someone's running from something bad. Whatever you left behind, it's not here. Rowan runs a clean outfit. No drinking to excess. No gambling. No hitting. Any hand who steps out of line gets one warning, then he's gone. You're safe here. Safe as anywhere can be, anyway." The words should have been comforting, but Maylene had heard promises of safety before. Wen had promised safety when he'd offered to take her in after her mother died, said he'd provide for her like family. She'd believed him right up until the first time his hand connected with her face. "I appreciate that," she said, because some response seemed necessary. "Don't have to believe me yet." Tom refilled her glass without being asked. "Just watch and you'll see. Actions matter more than words out here." Footsteps on the stairs announced Rowan's return. He'd taken off his hat, revealing dark hair streaked with early gray. "Got you settled in the room at the end of the hall. It's got a lock on the door, inside lock. Keys on the dresser, inside lock. So she could keep people out, not so they could keep her in. Another small thing that shouldn't have mattered but did." "I can show you around now if you're up to it, or you can rest," Rowan continued. "Dinner's usually around 6. We eat simple, whatever's available, nothing fancy. You're welcome to join us or take meals in your room if you prefer. Sarah left a cold chicken and fresh bread in the larder if you're hungry now. So many choices. After 3 years of being told when to wake, what to wear, when to eat, when to speak, the sudden abundance of options felt overwhelming. "I'd like to see my room," Maylene said. "If that's all right." "Of course," Rowan gestured toward the stairs. "I'll let you get settled. Washroom's the second door on the left. There's a pump for water and towels in the cupboard. If you need anything, I'll be in the barn until dinner." He left then, boots heavy on the wooden floor, and Maylene found herself alone in a stranger's house, listening to unfamiliar sounds. Chickens outside, wind against the windows, her own breathing, steady and uninterrupted by fear for the first time in recent memory. The stairs required effort. Each step sent discomfort through her ankle, but she made it to the top and found her room exactly where Rowan had said. The door stood open. Inside, a bed with an iron frame and what looked like a genuine quilt, a dresser with an oil lamp, a washstand with a clean basin, and a window overlooking the front pastures. Simple. Clean. And there, on the dresser, a brass key. Maylene picked it up. The metal was cold against her palm, heavier than it looked. She closed the door and turned the key in the lock. The bolt slid home with a solid click. Then she sat on the edge of the bed and allowed herself to cry. Not dramatic, gasping sobs. She'd learned long ago that loud crying got you hurt. These were quiet tears, the kind that leaked out despite your best efforts to hold them back, born from exhaustion and pain and the strange vertigo of realizing you might finally be somewhere that didn't require constant vigilance. The bed was soft. The room smelled like lavender and sunshine. Through the window, she could see Rowan walking toward the barn, Tom beside him, the two men deep in conversation. Working men. People with routines and purposes and lives that didn't revolve around cruelty. Maylene lay back on the quilt, intending to rest just for a moment. She woke 4 hours later to someone knocking gently on her door. "Miss Joe?" Sarah's voice, though she hadn't met the woman yet. "Don't mean to disturb, but dinner's ready if you want it. No obligation. I can leave a plate outside your door if you'd rather stay in." Maylene pushed herself up, wincing as forgotten injuries made themselves known. The light outside had gone golden orange, sunset approaching. She'd slept through the entire afternoon. "I'll be down," she called, voice rough from disuse. "Give me a moment." She found the washroom, splashed cold water on her face, and attempted to make herself presentable. The mirror showed her what she already knew. Too thin, bruises fading but still visible. Eyes that had seen too much. Not what anyone would call beautiful. Definitely not what a rancher would want for a wife. But Rowan had said he'd liked her letters. Had said they could figure out if they suited with time and no pressure. Maybe that was enough to start with. The kitchen had filled with the smell of beef stew and fresh bread. Sarah turned out to be a round woman in her 50s with capable hands and a warm smile that reached her eyes. She took one look at Maylene and made a sympathetic sound. "Oh, honey, come sit. You look dead on your feet." Rowan and Tom were already at the table, a scarred oak piece that could seat 8 easily. They both stood when Maylene entered, a courtesy she hadn't expected. Rowan pulled out a chair for her, the one closest to the stove where she'd be warmest. "Hope you like stew," Sarah said, ladling a generous portion into a bowl. "It's about all I'm good for on short notice. Got biscuits too, fresh this morning." The food was simple but well made, and Maylene realized she hadn't eaten anything substantial since yesterday. She started slowly, aware of 3 pairs of eyes carefully not watching her, pretending to focus on their own meals while monitoring her reactions. "This is very good," she said after the 3rd bite. "Thank you," Sarah beamed. "Well, aren't you sweet? Rowan said you wrote that you miss Chinese food. I don't know the first thing about cooking it, but if you want to teach me, I'm willing to learn. Might be nice to expand my repertoire beyond beef and potatoes." "I can try," Maylene said carefully, "if I can find the right ingredients." "There's a Chinese grocery in Billings," Tom offered. "About a day's ride. We go for supplies every few weeks. Could add it to the list." They were doing it again, offering things, making her life easier, expecting nothing obvious in return. Maylene's instinct was to refuse, to not create obligations, but she caught herself. These people were trying to be kind. The least she could do was accept gracefully. "That would be nice. Thank you." Dinner continued with small talk about ranch business, cattle counts, fence repairs, the upcoming roundup. No one asked Maylene questions she couldn't answer, and when she stayed silent, they didn't push. Just included her by proximity, letting her exist in the space without demanding performance. After dinner, Sarah produced liniment and clean bandages. "Let me see that ankle." Maylene hesitated, but Rowan and Tom had already excused themselves to check on the horses, giving her privacy. She pulled up her skirt enough to expose her foot and lower leg. Sarah's expression went carefully neutral as she examined the swelling and discoloration. "This is more than a twist. You've got torn ligaments here, maybe worse. How long ago?" 9 days. "And you've been walking on it?" "I didn't have a choice." Sarah's hands were gentle as she applied liniment, the sharp smell of camphor and menthol filling the air. "Well, you've got choices now. This needs to be wrapped and elevated. You should stay off it for at least a week, let it heal proper." "I can't." "Can't what?" "This is a ranch, honey. We don't have deadlines that can't shift. Rest, heal, everything else can wait." The bandaging was expert, firm, but not painful. Sarah worked in silence for a while before speaking again. "Those bruises on your arms. There are more, aren't there?" Maylene went still. I'm not asking for details, Sarah said quietly. Just want you to know I've got eyes. Whatever happened before you came here, it wasn't your fault. And it's not happening here. Rowan's good people. So's Tom. You're safe now. Everyone keeps saying that. Because it's true. I know trust isn't something you can just decide to do. It's earned bit by bit. But we've got time. She tied off the bandage with a neat knot. There. Keep it wrapped, use the liniment twice a day, and for heaven's sake, rest. Doctor's in town if the swelling doesn't go down in a few days. After Sarah left, Maylene sat alone in the kitchen, her ankle throbbing but somehow feeling better than it had in over a week. The house had gone quiet around her. Rowan and Tom in the barn, Sarah headed home to her own family, just Maylene and the settling sounds of a building cooling in the evening air. She made her way upstairs slowly, locked her door, and changed into her nightdress. The bed welcomed her like an old friend, and as she lay there in the darkness, Maylene tried to imagine what came next. A week of rest to heal her ankle, time to learn the rhythms of ranch life, meals with people who said please and thank you, a room with a lock that only she controlled. It didn't seem real. Any moment now, she'd wake up back in San Francisco, back in that locked room, back in hell. But the quilt under her fingers felt solid. The pain in her ankle was real. The sound of cattle in the distance, the creak of the house, the smell of liniment, all real. Maybe, just maybe, this was real too. Maylene closed her eyes and let exhaustion pull her under, one hand wrapped around the brass key she'd tucked under her pillow. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. But tonight, for the first time in 3 years, she would sleep without fear of her door opening in the darkness. That alone felt like victory. The first week passed in a blur of sleep and waking, her body demanding payment for years of running on empty. Maylene would surface from unconsciousness long enough to eat whatever Sarah left on a tray outside her door, use the washroom, rewrap her ankle, then sink back into dreams that ranged from peaceful to nightmarish. Sometimes she'd wake with Wen's voice still echoing in her ears, his threats as vivid as if he stood beside the bed. Other times she'd jolt awake convinced she'd overslept, that punishment waited for her laziness, only to remember with dizzying relief that no one here cared what time she woke. On the 8th morning, she opened her eyes to find genuine hunger gnawing at her stomach and her ankle feeling almost normal. The swelling had gone down significantly, and when she tested her weight on it, the pain had dulled to a manageable ache. Progress. She dressed carefully in her better dress, still worn, still obviously mended in places, but clean. Her hair took longer. 3 years of quick, practical braids had left her out of practice with anything more elaborate, but she managed to twist it into something presentable. The mirror showed improvements. The hollows under her eyes less pronounced, the bruises faded to yellowish shadows. Still thin, still damaged, but less like a corpse and more like a person. Downstairs she found the kitchen empty but evidence of recent occupation. Fresh coffee in the pot, still warm. Biscuits wrapped in cloth. A note in masculine handwriting. Gone to check the north fence, back by noon, help yourself. R. The casual assumption that she could simply help herself to food without permission or payment felt strange. Maylene poured coffee, took 2 biscuits, and carried them to the kitchen table. Through the window she could see the barn and part of the corral, where several horses stood dozing in the morning sun. No people visible, just land and animals and the slow business of a working ranch. She was finishing her second cup when Sarah bustled in carrying a basket of eggs. Well, look who's among the living. Sarah set the basket down and immediately moved to inspect Maylene's ankle. How's it feeling? Better, much better. Thank you for the liniment and bandages. That's what neighbors do. Sarah started cracking eggs into a bowl with practiced efficiency. You hungry for real food? I'm making breakfast for the hands when they come in from morning chores. I can help. Sarah paused mid-crack, studying her. You sure? You've barely been on your feet. I'm sure. I need to start doing something. I can't just sleep and eat forever. Why not? You earned it. But Sarah was already pulling out another bowl, handing it over. All right then, you can whisk these while I get the bacon going. Fair warning though, I'm going to put you to work properly if you're offering. Got a whole ranch's worth of men to feed and only 2 hands to do it with. They fell into an easy rhythm, Sarah directing while Maylene executed. The older woman talked constantly, a running commentary on ranch gossip, town news, and her own family's various dramas. 3 sons, all grown and scattered to different territories. A husband who'd died in a mine collapse 12 years back. She'd been cooking for Rowan's outfit ever since, grateful for the work and the company.
Lonely business, running a ranch, Sarah said, flipping bacon. Rowan rattles around this big house like a ghost most days. Used to be different when Catherine was alive. She'd fill every room with noise and life. After she died, the quiet nearly drove him mad. Maylene whisked eggs more vigorously than necessary. What was she like, Catherine? Fire and sweetness all mixed together. Tiny woman, couldn't have weighed more than 90 pounds soaking wet, but she'd face down a charging bull if it threatened her chickens. She loved this place, loved Rowan more. When the cholera took her, it broke something in him. Sarah glanced over. That's why he waited so long to send for someone new. Wasn't sure he could stand having another person around to lose. Then why did he? Sarah smiled. Because being alone was killing him slower but just as sure, and because Tom finally told him that Catherine would have boxed his ears for wasting his life mourning instead of living. She pulled the bacon from the pan, set it to drain. Pour those eggs in here, would you? The boys will be coming in hungry as wolves any minute. Right on cue, Boots stomped on the porch. Tom entered first, followed by 2 younger men Maylene hadn't met yet. They stopped short, seeing her at the stove. "Ma'am," the taller one said, yanking off his hat. Red hair, freckles, couldn't have been more than 25. "Didn't know you were up and about." "This is Jack Morrison," Sarah said, "and the quiet one behind him is Danny Chen." The second name made Maylene look closer. Danny was Chinese, though American-born by his speech when he finally mumbled a greeting. He kept his eyes down, shoulders hunched in a posture she recognized intimately. Someone used to making himself small. "Danny's been with us 2 years," Tom said, moving to the wash basin to clean up. "Best hand with horses I've ever seen. Completely useless with paperwork, but nobody's perfect." "Can read fine," Danny muttered. "Just can't make the letters go right when I write them. Which is why I do all the record keeping and you stick to keeping the horses alive," Tom said without heat. "Play to our strengths." They settled around the table while Sarah and Maylene served breakfast. The men ate like they'd been starved, which, given the amount of physical labor they did, made sense. Conversation was sparse and practical, mostly about work that needed doing and which pastures to rotate the cattle to next. Rowan arrived halfway through, looking tired and dusty. He nodded to Maylene, but didn't make a fuss about her being up, just washed, and took the plate she handed him with a quiet "thank you" that somehow meant more than elaborate praise would have. "North fence is going to need full replacement, not just patching," he told Tom between bites. "Whole sections rotted through. I'm thinking we take 3 days, pull it all down, and put in new posts." "We've got the lumber?" "Most of it. Might need to order more. I'll ride into town tomorrow, talk to Patterson at the mill." "I can go," Tom offered. "You've got that meeting with Henderson about the hay contract." "Right. Forgot about that." Rowan rubbed his face, clearly running through mental calculations. "All right, you go to town. Take Danny with you. He needs to pick up that tack we ordered anyway." The conversation continued, decisions made and tasks divided with the easy efficiency of people who'd worked together long enough to function as a unit. Maylene watched the dynamics, noting how Rowan listened as much as he directed, how Tom offered input freely without overstepping, how even Jack and Danny contributed ideas without fear of being shot down. So different from Wen's household, where everyone had moved in careful silence, afraid to draw attention or speak without permission. After breakfast, the men dispersed to their various tasks. Sarah started cleaning up, but Maylene took the dishes from her hands. "I'll do these. You've done enough. I'm paid to do them." "Then consider it me earning my keep." Sarah studied her face for a long moment, then nodded. "All right, but I'm staying to dry, and that's final. Good chance to talk without the men underfoot anyway." They worked in companionable silence for a while before Sarah spoke again. "You and Danny should talk sometime. He came here in rough shape too. Different kind of rough, but rough all the same. Might help to know someone who understands what it's like being Chinese in a place that doesn't always want you. He seems to fit in well enough." "Now yes. 2 years ago? That boy was about as skittish as they come. Tom found him half-starved in an alley in Billings, fired from the railroad for fighting back when some foreman decided Chinese workers made good target practice. Brought him here, gave him work, and Danny's been loyal as a dog ever since."
Sarah set a dried plate on the stack.
Rowan's got a habit of collecting strays. Tom was a stray once too, though that was before my time. And you? Sarah's laugh was rueful. Suppose I am too, in a way. Widow with no prospects and no family to fall back on. Rowan gave me work when most ranchers would have hired someone younger and prettier to cook their meals. Guess we're all a collection of misfits here, finding ways to fit together. The idea settled into Maylene's chest, strange and almost painful. A collection of people who didn't quite belong anywhere else, building something together. It felt fragile, like something that could shatter if you looked at it wrong, but it also felt real in a way nothing in San Francisco ever had.
The days began to establish a pattern. Maylene would wake with the household, help Sarah prepare breakfast, then spend the morning learning whatever needed learning. Sarah taught her American cooking, which involved far more butter and beef than Chinese cuisine, but had its own appeal. Tom showed her around the ranch properly, explaining how everything worked, where things were kept, which animals had, which personalities. That one's Lucifer, he said, pointing to a particularly ornery rooster. He'll come at you if you turn your back. Catherine used to say he had a vendetta against the entire human race. How do you collect eggs with him around? Carefully, or you get someone else to do it. Tom demonstrated, moving with quick efficiency while the rooster made threatening noises. He's all bluster mostly, but he did get Jack good last month, drew blood. Maylene found herself smiling despite the absurdity. Why keep him? Because he's good at his job. The hens are safe and productive under his watch, even if he is a complete bastard about it. Sometimes you tolerate the difficult ones because they're useful. She thought about that later while helping Danny groom horses. The young man worked mostly in silence, his hands gentle and sure with the animals. He'd barely spoken directly to her since that first breakfast, though she'd caught him watching her sometimes with an expression she couldn't quite read. Sarah said you've been here 2 years, Maylene ventured, brushing down a mare named Bess. Danny's hands paused briefly on the gelding he was currying. Yes, ma'am. Do you like it? Better than anywhere else I've been, he resumed brushing. Rowan doesn't care that I'm Chinese, just cares if I work hard and treat the animals right. That's more than most places offer. Do people in town give you trouble? Sometimes. Mostly they ignore me, which is fine. Tom comes with me when I need to go for supplies, and that helps. People respect Tom. He glanced at her sideways. They'll probably give you trouble too if you go. Being Chinese and being a woman, that's 2 things for them to have opinions about. I'm used to people having opinions about me. Yeah, well, here those opinions don't matter much. Ranch is its own world. Town can think what it wants. It was the most he'd said to her at once, and Maylene treasured it. Danny understood things Sarah and Tom couldn't, the specific weight of being foreign in a country that barely tolerated your presence. They finished the grooming in silence, but it felt different now. Less like strangers sharing space, and more like 2 people who recognized something in each other. Rowan remained a puzzle. He was unfailingly polite, never demanded anything, and gave her space to exist without constant oversight. But he also kept his distance, their interactions limited to practical exchanges at meals or brief conversations about ranch business. Sometimes she'd catch him watching her with an expression she couldn't decipher. Not desire exactly, but something gentler. Concern, maybe, or curiosity. 2 weeks after her arrival, Maylene woke to find frost on the windows and the air sharp with cold. Fall was settling in properly, and with it came the reality that she'd need warmer clothes. Her thin San Francisco dresses wouldn't survive a frontier winter. She mentioned this to Sarah over breakfast. I've got fabric, Sarah said immediately. We can make you something warmer. I'm decent with a needle, and if you can sew at all, we'll manage between us. I can sew. Good. Then we'll start today. You'll need at least 2 warm dresses, a good coat, and proper boots. Those little slippers you're wearing won't cut it once the snow comes. They spent the afternoon in Sarah's small house in town, surrounded by fabric and patterns. Sarah had a good eye for color and pulled out a deep blue wool that made Maylene's skin look less sallow. This'll suit you. We'll make it simple but sturdy. No sense putting in fancy details that'll just catch on things around the ranch. As they cut and pinned, Sarah asked careful questions about Maylene's life before, never pushing but clearly trying to understand. Maylene found herself answering more honestly than she'd intended, talking about her mother's death, about when taking her in under the guise of family duty, about the slow realization that she'd traded one form of dependency for something much darker.
He said he owned me, Maylene said quietly, pins held between her lips as she worked on a hem. That my mother had owed him money, and I had to work it off. But the debt never got smaller. He'd add to it. Cost of food, cost of housing, cost of a broken dish or burned dinner. Always something. Sarah's hand stilled on the fabric. That's not ownership. That's slavery with extra steps. I know that now, but when you're in it, when you have nowhere else to go, you believe what you're told. He was very good at making me believe I deserved it. Nobody deserves that. Nobody. My mother used to say the world isn't fair, but we endure what we must. Maylene removed the pins from her mouth, setting them carefully in the cushion. For a long time, I thought enduring was enough, that survival was victory. And now I'm starting to think maybe survival is just the beginning. Maybe there's supposed to be more. Sarah reached over and squeezed her hand. There is, honey. There absolutely is. The dress took 3 days to complete, but when Maylene finally wore it, the difference was remarkable. The wool held heat, the fit allowed for movement, and the deep blue did something pleasant for her complexion. She looked less like a refugee and more like someone who belonged. Rowan noticed at dinner that night. New dress suits you. It was the first personal comment he'd made about her appearance, and Maylene felt heat rise in her cheeks. Sarah helped make it. Sarah's got good taste. He went back to his stew, but something had shifted. The comment hung in the air between them, acknowledgement that he saw her as more than just an obligation or a problem to solve.
October slid into November, and Maylene's role on the ranch solidified. She took over most of the cooking with Sarah's guidance, discovering she had a talent for adapting recipes and making do with whatever was available. The men ate everything she put in front of them without complaint, though Danny always looked particularly pleased when she managed to incorporate Chinese flavors into otherwise American dishes. She learned to read the weather by watching how the horses behaved, to predict rain by the way the cattle clustered. Tom taught her to shoot, reasoning that anyone living on a ranch should know how to handle a rifle. Her first attempts were disasters. The recoil startled her, made her flinch, reminded her too much of other kinds of violence. But Tom was patient, adjusting her stance, talking her through the fear. Gun's just a tool, he said, like a hammer or a knife. It's the person holding it that makes it good or bad. Eventually, she managed to hit the targets more often than she missed them. Not expert level, but competent enough that Tom declared her passable. You'll do in a pinch. Let's hope you never need to. The conversations with Rowan grew longer, more substantial. He'd ask her opinion on things, whether to plant winter wheat in the far field, which horse to breed next season, if the new henhouse should go near the barn or closer to the main house. At first, Maylene assumed he was just being polite, but he actually listened to her answers, sometimes changing his plans based on her input. You notice things, he said one evening while they were reviewing supply lists. Details other people miss. That's valuable. I learned to notice things. Where I was before, missing details could be dangerous. His expression darkened. He hit you a lot? It was the first time he'd asked directly about her past, and Maylene's instinct was to deflect. But something about the quiet kitchen, the lamp burning low between them, the fact that he'd waited weeks to ask, it made her want to be honest. Yes, not every day, but often enough that I was always waiting for it. He had rules, but the rules would change depending on his mood. The same thing that pleased him one day would enrage him the next. I could never predict it. Rowan's jaw worked. I'm sorry that happened to you. You didn't do it. No, but I'm still sorry it happened. Nobody should live like that. Maylene traced a pattern on the table with her finger, not looking at him. The marriage broker told you I was in a difficult situation. How much did he tell you? That you needed to leave San Francisco urgently, that you were willing to marry sight unseen to make that happen. He hinted that you were running from someone dangerous but didn't give details. Rowan leaned back in his chair. I didn't ask for more. Figured you'd tell me what you wanted me to know when you were ready. And if I never wanted to tell you, then that was your business. Everyone's got a past. Not all of it needs discussing. The acceptance in his voice made her chest tight. She'd expected questions, demands for explanation, judgment about her choices. Instead, he offered privacy and patience. His name was Wen Zhao, she said quietly. He ran import business in San Francisco. My mother worked for him before she got sick. When she died, I had nothing. Wen offered to take me in, said he'd employ me in the business. For the first month, it was fine. Then one night I burned the rice for dinner, and he backhanded me across the face. Said I was careless, needed to learn respect. She kept talking, words spilling out like water from a broken dam. Told him about the escalating violence, the locked doors, the impossible debts, the complete isolation Wen had engineered. Rowan listened without interrupting, his face growing harder with each detail, but he didn't stop her or try to comfort her. Just let her speak. I found your advertisement in a newspaper Wen left on the table, Maylene finished. He was looking at the shipping schedules, planning a trip to Seattle. I knew if he left, he'd lock me in again. So I stole money from his desk, paid the marriage broker, and left while Wen was at the docks. I don't know if he's looking for me or if he decided I wasn't worth the trouble, but I couldn't stay there anymore. Even if it meant marrying a stranger, I had to get out. Rowan was quiet for a long moment after she finished. Then he said, "If he comes looking, he won't get past the property line." I mean that literally. You're under this roof. You're under my protection. He touches you again, it'll be the last thing he does. The certainty in his voice should have frightened her. Violence promising to meet violence, but instead it felt like security. Not because she wanted Rowan to fight her battles, but because she knew he would stand with her if the battle came. "Thank you," she said. "Nothing to thank me for. It's what decent people do." The next morning brought the first real snow, fat flakes that covered everything in white. Maylene stood at the kitchen window watching it fall, marveling at the beauty despite the cold it represented. In San Francisco, she'd seen snow maybe twice in her entire life. "Here," Tom said, "it would be a regular companion until spring." Rowan came in stamping his feet, covered in snow from morning chores. "Going to be a hard winter. Can feel it in my bones." "Is the ranch prepared?" "As prepared as we can be. Got plenty of hay put up, animals are in good condition, wood piles stacked high. We'll manage." He poured coffee, warming his hands on the cup. "Might be weeks at a time where we can't get to town, though. You comfortable with that? Being stuck out here with just us?" Malin considered the question honestly. A few weeks ago, the thought of being snowed in with strangers would have terrified her. Now, surrounded by people who'd shown her nothing but patience and kindness, it felt almost safe. "I'm comfortable," she said. He nodded, satisfied. "Good. Because once the snow really starts, there's no leaving until it melts. We'll be in close quarters. Want to make sure you're all right with that." Close quarters meant more interaction, more chances to let her guard down, more opportunities to accidentally reveal the broken parts she usually kept hidden. But it also meant stability, routine, no unexpected threats arriving from the outside world. "I'll manage," Maylene said, echoing his earlier words. And she did. As November became December and the snow piled higher, life on the ranch settled into winter rhythms. Days were shorter, work was harder, but there was a particular intimacy to it. Evening meals lasted longer, everyone lingering at the table to share warmth and conversation. They played cards, Jack teaching Maylene poker, despite Tom's protest that she'd clean them all out once she understood the game. They read aloud from books, taking turns with voices and characters. They simply existed together, passing the long dark hours as humans had done for centuries when winter locked them in. Rowan started sitting next to her rather than across from her at dinner. A small change, barely noticeable, but it meant their shoulders sometimes brushed when reaching for bread or salt. Each touch felt deliberate and gentle. Nothing demanded, just contact offered and accepted. One night, after everyone else had gone to bed, Maylene found him on the porch despite the cold, staring out at the snow-covered pastures. "Can't sleep?" she asked. "Too much thinking. You?" "Same." She wrapped her shawl tighter, breath fogging in the frozen air. "What are you thinking about?" "Whether I'm doing right by you." He glanced at her. "You've been here almost 2 months. We're legally married but living like strangers. That's not fair to you." "It's exactly what you promised. Time to figure out if we suit." "And have we?" "Suited, I mean." Malin considered the question carefully. 2 months ago, she'd have said she could never trust a man again, never imagine feeling safe in one's presence. But Rowan had proven himself day after day through small acts of decency. Never raised his voice, never raised his hand, never demanded anything she wasn't freely offering. "I think we might," she said slowly. "You're patient, kind. You treat me like a person instead of property. That's a pretty low bar." "It's the bar I have." He turned to face her fully. I want more than just clearing a low bar, Maylene. I want you to be happy here. Actually happy, not just less miserable than before. The use of her first name struck her. He'd been calling her Miss Joe this whole time, maintaining formality and distance. This felt like crossing a threshold. I don't know what happy looks like yet, she admitted, but I know I don't dread waking up here. That's more than I've had in years. Rowan reached out slowly, telegraphing his movement, giving her time to retreat if she wanted. When she didn't move, his hand settled over hers on the porch railing. Warm despite the cold, calloused from work, steady. Then we'll figure out happy together, he said. No rush, no pressure. Just two people learning each other. Standing there in the frozen night, his hand on hers, Maylene felt something shift inside her chest. Not love, that would take more time, more trust, more proof. But the possibility of love. The idea that maybe she could have this, could deserve this, could build something real with someone who saw her as an equal. I'd like that, she whispered. They stayed there until the cold drove them inside. Hands linked, breath mingling in the darkness. Two damaged people beginning to believe in repair. Winter tightened its grip through January, and with the deep cold came a shift in how Rowan touched her. Nothing forceful, nothing assumed, just his hand finding hers when they walked to the barn in darkness, his arm steadying her when ice made the steps treacherous, his body angling between her and the wind without making a show of it. Small protections that felt nothing like possession and everything like care. Maylene found herself leaning into these moments instead of away from them. She'd watch him across the dinner table, noticing details she'd missed before. The way his eyes crinkled when Jack told a particularly bad joke, how he always served himself last, the scar on his knuckle from some old injury he'd never explained. He was becoming real to her, not just the idea of safety, but an actual person with depths worth exploring. You're staring, Sarah said one afternoon while they kneaded bread. Maylene felt heat rise to her face. I wasn't. Sure you weren't, and I'm the Queen of England. Sarah punched down her dough with more force than necessary. It's all right to look, you know. He's your husband, legally speaking. And even if that paper doesn't mean much to either of you yet, there's no crime in noticing a good man when you're standing next to one. It feels strange, noticing him that way. Because of what happened before? Because I didn't think I could feel that way about anyone. After when, I thought that part of me was just gone. Broken permanently. Sarah's hands gentled on the dough. Trauma doesn't break you, honey. It just convinces you that you're broken. There's a difference. What you're feeling now, that's proof you're healing, not proof of damage. The words settled somewhere deep and Maylene turned them over while she worked. Healing. The concept felt foreign but not impossible. She'd felt her ankle heal, felt strength returning to her body as regular meals and decent rest did their work. Maybe the inside could heal too, given enough time and the right conditions. That night, Rowan asked her to walk with him after dinner. The moon was full, turning the snow-covered landscape into something otherworldly and bright. Their breath plumed in the frozen air as they followed the fence line away from the house. Wanted to talk to you about something, Rowan said after they'd walked in silence for a while. Spring's coming eventually, though it doesn't feel like it now. When it does, there'll be a lot of work, branding, roundup, all of it. Town gets busy too. People coming out of winter hibernation, wanting to socialize. All right, what I'm asking is whether you want to come to town with me when that happens. Meet people properly, not just Sarah and the hands. Let folks know you're here to stay. He paused. Or if you'd rather keep to the ranch, that's fine too. I just want to know what you're comfortable with. Maylene thought about the stares she'd gotten that first day, the way the town had gone quiet watching her limp past. Chinese and female and clearly damaged. 3 marks against her before she'd even opened her mouth. What will people say about me? Some will say ignorant things because that's what ignorant people do. Some will be kind. Most will be curious and try to hide it badly. He stopped walking, turning to face her. But what they say doesn't change what's true. You're my wife. You belong here. Anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with me. The fierceness in his voice sent warmth through her chest despite the cold. You'd defend me? Even if it cost you business or friendships? Without hesitation. You're mine to defend now. That's what marriage means to me, paper or not. Mine. The word should have triggered panic, should have sounded like ownership, but coming from Rowan it felt different. Not possession, but commitment. Not a claim, but a promise. Then I'll go to town with you, Maylene said. When spring comes, I won't hide. He smiled, and in the moonlight, it transformed his usually serious face into something almost boyish. Good, because I'd like to show you off a little, if I'm being honest. Let people see what I see. And what do you see? Someone stronger than she knows. Someone who survived hell and came out the other side still capable of kindness. He reached up slowly, giving her time to retreat, and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. Someone beautiful, though I don't think you believe that yet. Malin's breath caught. No one had called her beautiful since before her mother died. Wen had called her useful, obedient, occasionally passable, but never beautiful. She'd stopped looking in mirrors except to verify she was presentable because all she saw was damage. I'm too thin. My face is too angular. I have scars. You're recovering from starvation and abuse. Your face has character, and scars just prove you survived. His thumb brushed her cheekbone, the touch feather light. Beauty isn't about being perfect. It's about being real. She didn't know what to say to that, so she did something she'd been thinking about for weeks, but hadn't found the courage to attempt. She stepped closer, closing the distance between them, and leaned her forehead against his chest. Just contact, just proximity, testing whether she could handle being this close to a man without fear. Rowan went very still. Then his arms came around her, loose enough that she could escape easily, but firm enough to feel secure. He was warm despite the cold, solid, real. His heart beat steady under her ear, and his breathing stayed even and calm. They stood like that until Maylene started shivering from the cold, then walked back to the house still close together, his arm around her shoulders and hers around his waist. It felt monumental and completely ordinary at the same time. February brought the worst storm anyone could remember. It started as ordinary snowfall and escalated into a screaming white nightmare that lasted 3 days. Visibility dropped to nothing. The wind howled like something alive and angry. Venturing outside meant risking getting lost between the house and barn, so they strung ropes between buildings and only went out when absolutely necessary to tend the animals. On the second day, Rowan came in from checking the cattle looking half-frozen, ice-crusted in his beard and eyebrows. He'd been out there for hours making sure the herd had access to food and water, that none had gotten separated and stranded. Jesus, Tom said, helping him out of his coat. You're practically blue. Had to move them to the south pasture. They were bunching up too tight near the fence. Lost one calf already. Froze before I could get there. Maylin was already heating water, pulling blankets from the cupboard. When Rowan sat heavily at the table, she wrapped the blankets around him and put hot coffee in his hands. Drink. Slowly. His hand shook badly enough that she had to steady the cup for him. Up close, she could see his lips had gone grayish, his skin too pale. This was more than just cold. This was the edge of something dangerous. We need to warm him up properly, Sarah said, all business now. Not too fast or it'll shock his system. Tom, get that big basin from the washroom and fill it with lukewarm water. We'll warm his feet first. They worked together, stripping off Rowan's frozen boots and socks, easing his feet into the water while he hissed at the discomfort. Maylene kept the blankets tight around his shoulders, rubbing his arms through the wool to encourage circulation. Stubborn fool, Tom muttered. Could have come back sooner. Cattle needed tending. Cattle won't care if their rancher freezes to death. They'll care when they starve because no one moved them to where the hay is. Typical Rowan, more concerned about the animals than himself. Maylene felt something fierce bloom in her chest, watching him argue through chattering teeth, defending his decisions even while barely able to sit upright. The warming took hours. Slowly, painfully, color returned to his skin. The shaking subsided. By evening, he could hold a cup on his own, though Sarah insisted he stay wrapped in blankets and not move from the chair near the stove. Maylene made him soup, thick beef broth with vegetables, the kind of thing Sarah said was good for getting warmth back into your bones. She watched him eat, monitoring each spoonful, and felt anxiety she couldn't quite name churning in her stomach. Stop looking at me like I'm going to die, Rowan said, mouth quirking. You could have, but I didn't. But you could have. The words came out sharper than intended. You risked your life for cattle, for animals, for our livelihood. Those cattle keep this ranch running. Without them, we've got nothing. Without you, the ranch has nothing either. Maylene heard her voice rising and couldn't stop it. You're the one who holds this together. You think Tom and Jack and Danny can run this place without you? You think I... She cut herself off, but not before Rowan's expression shifted, understanding dawning. You were scared, he said quietly. Of course I was scared. She turned away, busying herself with cleaning up dinner things. I spent 3 days watching you go in and out of that storm, each time wondering if you'd make it back. Do you have any idea what that felt like? Tom and Sarah had made themselves scarce, taking their dinner to the other room and leaving them alone. Rowan set down his soup bowl and stood, blankets falling away. Maylene, you should rest. Maylene, look at me. She didn't want to. Looking at him and acknowledging the fear still coursing through her, the realization that had crystallized during those 3 days of watching him risk himself repeatedly. But he crossed the kitchen and gently turned her to face him. I'm sorry I scared you, he said. I wasn't trying to be reckless. But this is ranch life. Sometimes it's dangerous. Sometimes you have to do things that carry risk because not doing them is worse. I understand that. Logically, I understand. But when I saw you come back today, barely able to stand, Her voice cracked. I just kept thinking about losing you, and I realized I can't lose you. His eyes widened slightly. Maylene, I know what the arrangement was. Time to see if we suit, no pressure, all of that. But somewhere in the last 4 months, it stopped being an arrangement for me. You became important. She forced herself to say it. I think I'm falling in love with you. Maybe have been for a while. And the thought of you dying out there in the snow was unbearable. Rowan's hands came up to frame her face, his touch gentle but certain. I'm not going anywhere. I promise you that. You can't promise that. The storm could have killed you. But it didn't. I'm right here. He leaned his forehead against hers, their breath mingling. And for the record, I've been in love with you since you told off that rooster for being a bastard. Watching you find your strength, seeing you smile for the first time, hearing you laugh at Jack's terrible jokes. It's been the best 4 months of my life. She pulled back to search his face. You love me? Completely. Probably shouldn't, given we barely know each other, but I do. Maylene felt tears burning behind her eyes. I don't know how to do this. Be in love. Be with someone without fear. I don't have a reference for healthy. Neither do I anymore. Catherine and I had something good, but she's gone and you're not her. We'll figure it out together. Make our own reference. His thumbs brushed away the tears that had started falling. Can I kiss you? Been wanting to for weeks, but didn't want to push. Instead of answering, Maylene rose on her toes and closed the distance between them. The kiss was tentative at first, gentle, testing. But then Rowan's arms came around her and she pressed closer, letting herself feel wanted without fear of punishment, desired without the weight of obligation. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Rowan kept her close. We can take this slow, he said. Whatever pace you need. I don't want slow. I've wasted 3 years being afraid. I don't want to waste any more time. That night, for the first time since arriving at the ranch, Maylene didn't sleep in her own room. She stayed with Rowan, the two of them simply holding each other while the storm raged outside. No demands, no expectations beyond proximity and warmth. Just two people choosing each other, letting the cold night prove how much better it was not to be alone. The storm finally broke on the 4th day, leaving behind a landscape buried in white and a sky so blue it hurt to look at. The ranch had survived. They'd lost 3 head of cattle and part of the chicken coop's roof, but the core was intact. March arrived with the first hints of thaw, and with it came changes that Maylene noticed before anyone else. Her cycle, which had been irregular for years thanks to stress and poor nutrition, had stabilized over the winter. When it failed to arrive on schedule, she first assumed it was just her body still adjusting. But when 2 weeks passed, then 3, and nausea started appearing in the mornings, she couldn't deny what was happening. She was pregnant. The realization hit her one morning while cooking breakfast, the smell of frying bacon suddenly overwhelming and nauseating. She barely made it outside before losing what little she'd eaten, and when she straightened up, Sarah was there with a knowing look. How far along? I don't know, maybe 6 weeks? Maylene wiped her mouth with the back of her hand. I'm not certain. Well, you're certain enough that you just turned green at perfectly good bacon. Sarah helped her back inside,
settled her at the table with dry toast. Does Rowan know? Not yet. I just figured it out myself. He'll be thrilled. Man's wanted children for years.
But Maylene felt anxiety coiling in her stomach alongside the nausea. Pregnancy meant vulnerability, dependency, being at someone's mercy in a whole new way. Wen had threatened it sometimes, said if she got pregnant, he'd make sure she never left because a child would tie her to him permanently. Even now, carrying Rowan's child felt dangerous in ways she couldn't articulate. She told him that evening after dinner, the words coming out flat and anxious. I'm pregnant. Rowan froze with his coffee cup halfway to his mouth. You're sure? Pretty sure. All the signs are there. He set down the cup carefully, his face cycling through several expressions before landing on something that looked like wonder. We're having a baby? Yes. Due probably in early October if my calculations are right. That's... He stood abruptly, crossed to her, pulled her into his arms. That's incredible. Amazing. We're having a baby. His joy was infectious but also terrifying. Maylene let him hold her, feeling the tension in her own body refusing to ease. Rowan noticed, pulling back to study her face. You're not happy. I'm scared. Of childbirth? Sarah says Doc Harrison is good with deliveries and we'll get you to town when the time comes. Not of childbirth. Of what comes after. A baby makes me vulnerable, trapped. If you turned out to be like Wen, I'm not Wen. His voice was firm. And this child doesn't trap you. If anything happened, if I died, or if I somehow became someone you couldn't trust, Tom and Sarah would help you. You'd have options. Always. You can't guarantee that. No, but I can promise I'll do everything in my power to make sure you never need those options. He took her hands, holding them between his. I love you. I love this child we made. Nothing about that is a cage. It's just us building a family. Maylene wanted to believe him. Part of her did believe him. But the part that had survived Wen by being constantly vigilant couldn't quite let go of the fear. The pregnancy progressed through spring. Morning sickness gave way to exhaustion, then to a period where Maylene felt almost normal except for the growing evidence beneath her dress. Rowan was attentive but not smothering. Sarah was a fountain of advice both useful and questionable, and the ranch work continued around her with accommodations made for her changing limitations. In late May, Tom rode back from a supply run looking troubled. He found Rowan in the barn and spoke in low tones that nevertheless carried to where Maylene was collecting eggs. Man in town asking questions. Chinese fellow, well-dressed, throwing money around, asking if anyone's seen a woman matching Maylene's description. Maylene dropped the egg basket. It hit the ground with a crash of breaking shells, but she couldn't move to clean it up. Her blood had gone cold, her vision narrowing to pinpoints. Rowan appeared beside her instantly. Breathe, just breathe. He found me. Wen found me. We don't know that for sure. Who else would it be? Her voice came out high and thin. He's here. He's in town. He's not going to do anything. Rowan's voice cut through the panic. Tom, what else? He's staying at the hotel. Told the clerk he's looking for his ward who ran away, that she's confused and needs to come home, making it sound like she's not in her right mind. That's exactly what he'd do. Maylene's hands shook. Make me sound crazy, unreliable. So when I say what he did, no one believes me. She could feel the old fear flooding back, erasing months of progress in seconds. The ranch that had felt safe now felt exposed. Vulnerable. Wen was less than an hour's ride away, and she was pregnant, slower, easier to catch. We need to make a plan, Tom said. He's going to come here eventually. He's probably asking around about ranches with Chinese women, and someone will point him this direction. Let him come. Rowan's jaw was set. He shows up here making accusations. He'll find out real fast that things work different on this side of the territory. Rowan, he's dangerous. Maylene gripped his arm. You don't understand. He's not just going to knock on the door politely. He'll bring men. He'll use force if he has to. He thinks I'm his property, and he doesn't accept losing his property. Then he's going to learn. Rowan covered her hand with his. Jack, go into town. Find Sheriff Morrison. Tell him we might have trouble coming. Danny, I want you to ride out to the Henderson place. See if we can borrow a couple of their hands for a few days. Tom, check the rifles and make sure we're stocked on ammunition. The men dispersed quickly, leaving Maylene and Rowan alone in the barn. I should run, she said. Leave before he gets here. That way he can't use me to hurt you or the baby. You're not running. Not from him. Not from anything. Rowan turned her to face him. You stand your ground this time. We stand our ground together. He'll kill you.
He can try. There was steel in Rowan's voice now. But I've got home advantage, good men, and the law on my side.
More importantly, I've got something worth fighting for. You and our child. He's got nothing but anger and wounded pride. That's not enough. Maylene wanted to believe him, but 3 years of conditioning told her Wen always won. Wen always got what he wanted eventually. Fighting him was pointless because he had infinite resources and no conscience. Sarah arrived an hour later, summoned by Tom. She took one look at Maylene's face and pulled her into a fierce hug. We're not letting him take you, you hear me? Over my dead body. That's what I'm afraid of. Maylene pulled back. He's hurt people before. Killed someone once, though he paid enough to make it go away. He won't hesitate to hurt anyone here if it means getting me back. Then we'll be ready for him. Sarah's face was grim. I've lived through range wars and claim jumpers, and my husband dying in my arms. One angry Chinese man doesn't scare me. But he should, Maylene thought. He absolutely should. The next 2 days crawled by. Every sound made Maylene jump. Every rider approaching the ranch sent her pulse racing. Rowan kept her close, never letting her wander far from the house or out of sight of the men who'd positioned themselves strategically around the property. Danny turned out to be surprisingly deadly with a rifle, a skill he'd learned defending himself in rail camps. Jack was solid, loyal, completely willing to fight for what he considered family. The two hands from the Henderson Ranch, brothers named Pete and Mike, arrived ready for trouble and asked no questions beyond what needed doing. Sheriff Morrison came out personally, a graying man in his 60s who'd known Rowan for years. He listened to Maylene's story, asked careful questions, and made notes in a worn leather journal. He comes here making threats. That's criminal intimidation. He tries to take you by force. That's kidnapping. He hurts anyone. That's assault or worse. Morrison closed his journal. You're a legally married woman now, Mrs. Hale. He's got no claim on you, guardian or not. That's the law's position, and I'll enforce it. The law didn't help me in San Francisco. Well, you're not in San Francisco anymore. You're in my jurisdiction, and I don't take kindly to people terrorizing women. He tipped his hat. I'll have a deputy watching the hotel. Moment this Wen character makes a move, I'll know about it. It should have been comforting, but Maylene couldn't shake the feeling that they were all underestimating what Wen was capable of. He arrived on the third day. Maylene was in the kitchen helping Sarah prepare dinner when Tom appeared at the door, expression tight. He's here. 4 men with him, coming up the road. Rowan emerged from his office, rifle in hand. Everyone to positions. Maylene, you stay inside. No. The word came out before she'd fully decided to say it. If this is about me, I need to be there. You're pregnant. You're not putting yourself in danger.
I've been in danger my whole life. This is my fight. She moved to stand in front of him. He needs to see me standing on my own ground. Needs to know I'm not the same person who ran from him. Rowan's jaw worked. Fine, but you stay behind me. Anything happens, you get back inside immediately. Promise me. I promise.
They walked out onto the porch together, Rowan slightly ahead, rifle held casual but ready. Tom, Jack, and Danny had positioned themselves strategically, Tom on the barn roof, Jack by the corral, Danny near the bunkhouse. The Henderson brothers were out of sight but within range.
Wen rode up the center of the group, immediately recognizable. Well-dressed, sitting his horse like he was accustomed to being obeyed. The men with him were hired muscle, obvious in their bearing and the weapons they carried openly. He pulled up 20 feet from the porch, taking in the scene with calculating eyes that finally landed on Maylene. His expression shifted from cold assessment to something harder. Maylene, you've caused me considerable trouble.
His voice. She'd almost forgotten the particular quality of it, how it could sound reasonable even while promising violence. Her body wanted to flinch, to cower, to apologize reflexively. But she was standing on her own porch, carrying her own child, surrounded by people who would defend her. She wasn't that girl anymore. You have no business here, Wen. I have every business. You're my ward. You stole from me and ran away. I'm here to collect what's mine and return you to San Francisco where you belong. She doesn't belong to you. Rowan's voice was level. She's my wife, legally married. I've got the papers to prove it.
Wen's mouth twisted. A marriage arranged under false pretenses. She was under my guardianship, required my permission to marry. Without that permission, the marriage is invalid. Actually, Sheriff Morrison said, riding into view from where he'd been waiting down the road, that's not how the law works in this territory. She's of legal age to consent to marriage. Your guardianship, if it ever legally existed, ended the moment she became a married woman. He positioned his horse between Wen's group and the porch. So you've got no claim, no legal standing, and no business on this property. Wen's expression darkened, but when he spoke, his voice stayed controlled. Sheriff, this woman is confused. She's been through trauma, doesn't understand what she's doing. I'm here to help her. That right? Morrison looked at Maylene. Mrs. Hale, you confused? Every eye turned to her. This was the moment. Either she spoke her truth and stood by it, or she let Wen's version of reality win by default. Maylene stepped forward, one hand resting on the slight swell of her stomach. I'm not confused. I know exactly what I'm doing and why. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. When Zhao took me into his household after my mother died. For 3 years, he beat me, starved me, locked me in rooms, and told me I owed him for every breath I took. He called it guardianship. I call it slavery with a prettier name. Wen's face went flat. Careful, Maylene. You're making serious accusations. I'm telling the truth. She pulled up her sleeve, showing the faded scars. These are from when he threw a teapot at me. I've got worse underneath my dress. Broken ribs that healed crooked, burn marks from when he held my hand over a stove flame, bruises that took months to fade. She heard Sarah make a pained sound behind her, but she didn't stop. This needed to be said where witnesses could hear it. I ran because staying meant dying slowly. I married Rowan because he offered me a way out, and I'd have married anyone to escape you, but I stayed because he's shown me what a real partnership looks like. He's never raised his hand to me, never locked me in, never made me beg for food or mercy. She met Wen's eyes directly. You're not taking me back. Not now. Not ever. I'd rather die on this porch than spend another day under your roof. The silence that followed was profound. Wen's control finally cracked, his face contorting with rage. You ungrateful little bitch. After everything I gave you, you gave me nothing but suffering. Maylene's voice rang clear, and I'm done accepting it. Wen dismounted in one smooth motion, moving toward the porch. Rowan shifted, bringing the rifle up. That's far enough. She's lying, making up stories to justify her theft and betrayal. I'll prove it if I... You'll prove nothing. Rowan's voice had gone deadly quiet. Because you're leaving, right now, before I stop being civilized about this. I'm not leaving without what belongs to me. Nothing here belongs to you. Morrison's hand had moved to his sidearm. And if you take another step toward that porch, I'm arresting you for trespassing and threatening behavior. Wen looked around, finally seeming to register the rifles pointed at him from multiple angles. The grim faces of men who had no investment in his version of events. He'd expected to find a frightened woman alone, or at best with one defender. Instead, he'd found a community that had closed ranks. His eyes found Maylene again, and she saw the calculation there. He was weighing options, measuring whether forcing the issue was worth the cost. This isn't over, he said finally. You can hide behind these people for now, but debts don't disappear. You'll pay what you owe eventually. The only debt was in your head. Maylene kept her voice level. I paid for my presence in your house 100 times over in blood and tears. We're even. More than even. One remounted, his men following suit. But before turning his horse, he looked at Rowan. You think you've won something here. You haven't. She's broken, damaged goods. You'll figure that out soon enough, and when you do, don't say I didn't warn you. Rowan's finger moved to the trigger. Get off my property. Don't come back. They rode out slowly, Wen's back straight with offended dignity, his men casting nervous glances at the armed ranch hands watching their departure. No one relaxed until they disappeared over the rise, and even then Tom kept watch from the barn roof. Maylene felt her legs go weak, adrenaline draining away and leaving nothing but trembling exhaustion. Rowan caught her before she fell, sweeping her up and carrying her inside despite her protests. I can walk. Let me do this. He set her down on the couch gently. You just face down your nightmare. Let me take care of you for a minute.
Sarah brought water, and Sarah sent Jack to town to make sure Morrison was keeping eyes on Wen, and the house slowly settled back into something resembling normal. But Maylene couldn't stop shaking. "He'll come back," she said. "Maybe not today or tomorrow, but he won't let this go. He doesn't accept losing." "Then he'll learn." Rowan sat beside her, pulling her against him. "You were incredible out there, standing your ground, telling your truth. I'm so damn proud of you." I was terrified. "I know, that's what made it brave." He kissed her forehead. "And you're not facing him alone ever again. That's a promise." Maylene wanted to believe it was over, that one would accept defeat and go back to San Francisco. But she knew him too well. This was just the beginning. Wen stayed in town for 2 more days, a presence that hung over the ranch like smoke you couldn't see but knew was there. Sheriff Morrison sent word each evening. Wen was asking questions, talking to merchants, offering money for information about the ranch's vulnerabilities. He was patient, methodical, gathering intelligence the way a general might before a siege. "He's planning something," Maylene said on the 3rd night, staring out the window at darkness that suddenly felt full of threats. "This is what he does. He waits until you think you're safe. Then he strikes." Rowan came up behind her, his reflection appearing in the glass next to hers. "Let him plan. We're ready. You don't know him like I do. He's not just angry, he's insulted. And for Wen, being insulted is worse than being hurt. It demands retribution." "Then he'll get a fight he's not expecting." Rowan's hand settled on her shoulder. "Stop watching the dark. Come to bed." But Maylene couldn't sleep. She lay beside Rowan listening to his steady breathing, her hand on her stomach where the baby, their daughter, she was somehow certain, kicked against her palm. This child deserved to grow up without fear, without looking over her shoulder constantly. Maylene had survived Wen, but she didn't want survival to be her daughter's inheritance. She wanted more. Freedom, safety. The kind of life where the worst thing you worried about was whether the chickens were laying enough eggs. Morning brought news from Morrison. Wen had checked out of the hotel before dawn, headed east toward Billings with his men. Gone, at least for now. The ranch exhaled collectively. Tom climbed down from his watch post. Jack and Danny went back to normal duties instead of perimeter patrols. The Henderson brothers returned home with Rowan's thanks and a promise of help if they ever needed it. "Think he's really gone?" Sarah asked while kneading bread with more force than necessary. "Gone from town, yes." "Gone for good?" Maylene shook her head. "He'll be back. Maybe not this month or next, but eventually. Men like Wen don't forget." "Then we'll deal with it when it comes. No sense borrowing trouble." Easier said than done. Maylene found herself jumping at shadows, reading threats into innocent circumstances. A stranger riding past the ranch sent her pulse racing. An unexpected knock at the door made her reach for the knife she'd started keeping in her apron pocket. Even Danny noticed, mentioning quietly one afternoon that she didn't have to live like she was still hunted. "But I am still hunted," Maylene said. "Just because he left doesn't mean he's done. Maybe not. But you can't spend every day waiting for the other shoe to drop. That's not living. That's just surviving in a different location." He was right, but knowing it and acting on it were different things. 3 years of conditioning didn't evaporate because you wanted it to. Fear had kept her alive for so long that living without it felt dangerous, like removing armor before the battle was truly over. June arrived with heat and the endless work of summer. Maylene's pregnancy became obvious enough that she couldn't hide it under loose dresses anymore. And with it came limitations she resented. She couldn't ride anymore, couldn't help with the heavy work, had to rest more often than she wanted. Rowan treated her like she was made of glass, which alternated between endearing and infuriating. "I'm pregnant, not dying," she snapped one afternoon when he'd insisted she sit down instead of helping hang laundry. "I know that, but you're carrying precious cargo, and I'd prefer both of you made it through this intact." Women have been having babies since the beginning of time while doing far more strenuous things than hanging sheets. Other women weren't half-starved and beaten for 3 years before getting pregnant. You're still recovering, whether you want to admit it or not. His tone gentled. "I'm not trying to cage you. I'm trying to keep you healthy." The distinction mattered, even if it still chafed. Maylene compromised by doing lighter tasks, focusing her energy on cooking and managing the household accounts, something she discovered she had an aptitude for. Numbers made sense, followed logical patterns, didn't lie or change based on mood.
You're better at this than I am, Rowan admitted one evening, reviewing the ledgers she'd reorganized. I've been tracking expenses wrong for years. No wonder I could never figure out where the money was going. You were tracking what you spent, not comparing it to what you earned in the same categories. It made the numbers useless for planning. She pointed to the new system she'd implemented. This way you can see at a glance which parts of the operation are profitable and which are draining resources. Where'd you learn this? My mother kept books for Wen's import business before she got sick. She taught me because she said women needed to understand money if they wanted any power in the world. Maylene traced a column of figures. It was one of the few useful things that came out of those years. Wen had me keeping his records after she died, at least until he decided I was making mistakes on purpose and stopped trusting me with them. Were you? Making mistakes on purpose? Sometimes. Small ones. A few dollars here and there moved into accounts he didn't watch closely. I was trying to save enough to run, but I never got close to what I'd need. She glanced at him. The money I took when I left, it was from those hidden accounts. Money he'd essentially stolen from himself because he was too arrogant to check my math. Rowan's mouth quirked. That's brilliant. That's survival. Though I suppose it's also theft, technically. I'd call it reclaiming stolen wages. You worked for him for 3 years, unpaid, except for room and board he held over your head as debt. You were owed a lot more than what you took. The validation helped, though guilt still nagged at her sometimes. Not because she thought one deserved the money, but because stealing, even from a monster, still felt like becoming something she didn't want to be. July brought a heat wave that made everything harder. Maylene was perpetually uncomfortable, her swollen belly making sleep difficult, and her temper short. Rowan bore the brunt of her mood swings with patience that sometimes made her feel worse because she knew she was being unreasonable and couldn't seem to stop. "I'm sorry," she said one night after snapping at him for the 3rd time that day. "I don't know why I'm like this. You're growing a whole person inside you while dealing with summer heat and lingering trauma. I think you're entitled to some irritability." He was rubbing her swollen feet, something he'd started doing without being asked. "Besides, you should hear the things Catherine used to say to me when she was pregnant. Made you sound downright pleasant. You never talk about her much." His hands paused briefly, then resumed their gentle pressure. "Hurts to, sometimes. We had 5 good years together before the cholera. She was pregnant when she got sick, about 4 months along. Lost the baby first, then her. 2 deaths in 3 days. Maylene felt her throat tighten. "I didn't know about the baby. Most people don't. We hadn't told anyone yet, wanting to wait until she was further along. Then it didn't matter because they were both gone." His voice had gone rough. "That's why I waited so long to try again. Couldn't face the idea of loving someone enough to lose them that badly twice. And now? Now I'm terrified every day that something will happen to you or our daughter. But I'm also happier than I've been in 5 years, so I guess fear is just the price of loving something worth losing." He looked up at her. "Worth it, though, even with the fear." She leaned down to kiss him, awkward with her belly in the way but needing the connection. "I'm going to do everything I can to make sure you don't lose us. I know you will, and I'll do everything I can to keep you both safe." It was a promise neither of them could truly keep, but it mattered that they made it anyway. August arrived, and with it came news that shattered their fragile peace. Danny rode back from town with supplies and a grim expression, finding Rowan in the barn. "Wen's back. Different hotel this time, but it's definitely him. Morrison says he showed up yesterday with a lawyer." Rowan's jaw tightened. "A lawyer?" "Said he's pursuing legal remedies for the return of his property and restitution for financial damages." Danny's mouth twisted, making it sound all proper and official. Maylene, who'd been close enough to overhear, felt ice flood her veins. This was exactly what she'd feared. When adapting his tactics, finding new angles of attack. He couldn't take her by force without consequences, so now he'd try to take her by law. "What kind of legal claim could he possibly have?" Rowan demanded. Morrison didn't have details yet, just knew a lawyer had filed papers at the courthouse. Said we should expect someone to serve notice within a few days. They got it the next morning. A nervous deputy rode out to deliver an official-looking document that outlined Wen's grievances in cold legal language. Breach of guardianship contract, theft of property and funds, alienation of ward,
damages totaling $5,000 or the return of Maylene Joe to fulfill her obligations.
This is insane. Rowan threw the papers on the table. He's treating you like your livestock he loaned out and wants back. That's exactly how he sees it.
Maylene forced herself to read through the document, though every word made her sick. He's claiming my mother signed a contract putting me under his guardianship until I turned 25, or married with his consent. Says the marriage to you is invalid because he didn't consent. Therefore, I'm still his ward, and leaving constituted breach of contract plus theft of his property. Do you remember your mother signing anything like that? She was dying, barely conscious at the end. He could have put anything in front of her and she wouldn't have known what she was signing. Maylene's hands shook. And even if she didn't sign it, he could have forged it. Wen has connections, money. He can make documents say whatever he wants. Sarah, reading over her shoulder, made a disgusted sound. This is nothing but legal extortion. He can't actually believe a court would side with him.
Doesn't matter what he believes. Matters what he can make a judge believe. Rowan was already moving toward his office. I'm riding to town, talking to Morrison, and finding us a lawyer who knows how to fight this. I'm coming with you. Maylene, you're 8 months pregnant, and it's my freedom we're fighting for. I'm coming.
They compromised with Rowan driving the wagon instead of riding horseback, making the journey slower but easier on Maylene. Tom came along, rifle across his lap, watching for trouble. Ash Creek looked the same as always, dusty Main Street, people going about their business, but Maylene felt like everyone was staring, judging. The Chinese woman who'd brought legal drama to their quiet town. The problem they hadn't asked for. Morrison met them at his office, his face grave. I was hoping to ride out and discuss this before you saw the papers. Wanted to prepare you. Little late for that. Rowan handed over the documents. What's our position here?
Legally?
Complicated.
Morrison settled behind his desk. If Wen can prove a valid guardianship contract existed, and that Maylene's marriage violated its terms, he might have standing to sue for damages. The contract law gets murky when you're dealing with cross-territorial issues, different jurisdictions. So he could win. He could tie you up in court for years and bankrupt you with legal fees even if he doesn't win, which might be the point. Make fighting him more expensive than settling. Maylene felt the trap closing around her. This was Wen's real genius, finding legal ways to hurt people, using the system as a weapon. Violence was risky and obvious. Lawsuits were civilized, respectable, and just as destructive. What if we settle? She heard herself ask. Pay him something to make this go away? No. Rowan's voice was flat. We're not giving that bastard a single dollar. It's not about money for him. It's about control. You pay him once, he'll just come back asking for more. But if it saves the ranch isn't worth your freedom. Nothing is. He turned to Morrison. Who's the best lawyer within 3 days' ride? That'd be Marcus Webb out of Helena. Expensive, but ruthless. He's defended some tough cases. Get him here. Whatever he costs, I'll pay it. Morrison nodded and left to send a telegram. Alone in the office, Rowan pulled Maylene close. We're going to fight this, all the way. He doesn't get to win. What if fighting ruins you financially? What if we lose everything? Then we lose everything and start over somewhere else. But we do it together, and we do it free of him. His hand settled on her belly. I'm not letting our daughter grow up watching her mother live in fear of some tyrant's legal threats. We end this now. Maylene wanted to believe it was possible, but she'd learned long ago that wanting something didn't make it true. Still, she nodded and tried to match his certainty with her own. They stayed in town overnight, taking rooms at the hotel, a different one from where Wen was staying, though Maylene felt his presence like a weight pressing down on her. She kept expecting him to appear, to force a confrontation, but he stayed invisible, playing the long game. Marcus Webb arrived 2 days later, a sharp-eyed man in his 40s who listened to their story without visible reaction, asked pointed questions, and took extensive notes. The contract is the key, he said finally. If it's legitimate, we've got problems. If it's forged or signed under duress, we can attack it. I'll need to depose Wen, examine the original document, maybe bring in a handwriting expert. How long will that take? Months. Maybe longer. These things don't move quickly. Webb looked at Maylene. You prepared for a prolonged fight? It's going to get ugly. He'll make accusations, paint you as unstable or criminal. You'll have to testify, probably multiple times. Relive everything he did to you in front of strangers. The thought made her want to vomit, but she forced herself to stay steady. If that's what it takes.
Good, because backing down now just emboldens him. Webb gathered his papers. I'll file our response to his suit, start discovery. In the meantime, avoid contact with him. Don't let him provoke you into doing anything that could hurt our case. They returned to the ranch the next day, and Maylene tried to settle back into routine despite the legal sword hanging over them. But everything felt different now, tainted. Work continued. Cattle didn't care about lawsuits, but the joy had leached out of it. She was in the kitchen 2 weeks later, trying to focus on canning vegetables, when the first real contraction hit. Not the practice ones she'd been having for weeks, but something deeper, more insistent. A tightening that started low in her back and wrapped around her belly like an iron band. Sarah, working beside her, noticed immediately. That a real one? I think so. How far apart are they? That was the first. But even as Maylene said it, she felt another beginning to build. Maybe not. Maybe this is just more practice. 3 hours later, there was no denying it. The baby was coming, and she was coming now. Rowan sent Danny racing for the doctor while Sarah and Tom prepared the bedroom. Everything happened too fast and too slow at the same time, pain that seemed endless between contractions, then sudden urgent progression that left no time to think. Doc Harrison arrived just as things were getting serious, taking charge with calm efficiency. Rowan held Maylene's hand through the worst of it, let her squeeze until his fingers went white. Never complained when she screamed at him that this was his fault. Almost there, Sarah kept saying. You're doing so good, honey. Just a little more. But the labor stretched on for hours. Day became night, and exhaustion dragged at Maylene until she wasn't sure she could keep going. Her body felt like it was being torn apart from the inside, and fear crept in alongside the pain. Women died doing this. Catherine had died doing this. I can't, she gasped between contractions. I can't do this anymore. Yes, you can. Rowan's face appeared above hers, stubbled and worried, but certain. You're the strongest person I know. You survived when. You can survive this. That's different. It's exactly the same. You endure what you have to, and then you come out the other side. He pressed a cool cloth to her forehead. Our daughter's almost here. She needs you to hold on just a little longer. Whether it was his words or just timing, something shifted. The next contraction came with an overwhelming urge to push, and Harrison was saying, that's it, one more. And then suddenly a baby was crying, loud and indignant and alive. It's a girl, Harrison announced, unnecessary since they'd both been saying she for months. Healthy lungs on this one. He laid the baby on Maylene's chest, and the world narrowed to this tiny, furious creature covered in blood and vernix, wailing at the injustice of being born. She was perfect and horrible, and the most beautiful thing Maylene had ever seen. Hello, Maylene whispered, exhausted beyond measure, but suddenly wide awake. Hello, little one. The baby stopped crying at the sound of her voice, dark eyes trying to focus on Maylene's face. Already stubborn, already strong, already everything Maylene had hoped for. Rowan was crying, not bothering to hide it, his hand gentle on the baby's back. She's incredible. You're incredible. The aftermath passed in a blur. Harrison checking them both, Sarah cleaning up, Tom bringing warm broth. Eventually, they were left alone, just the three of them in the quiet bedroom with an oil lamp burning low. We need a name, Rowan said softly. They discussed options but never decided. Chinese names, American names, combinations of both. Nothing had felt right. Lily, Maylene said suddenly. Like my mother's name, Lilling, but simpler, easier here. Lily Hale, Rowan tested it. I like it, strong but gentle, fits her. Lily chose that moment to start fussing, and Maylene awkwardly tried to figure out nursing while everything hurt and nothing worked the way it was supposed to. Eventually, with Sarah's patient guidance, they managed it, and the baby settled into feeding with the same determination she'd shown being born. She's going to be trouble, Sarah predicted fondly. Smart and stubborn and unwilling to take no for an answer. Good, Maylene said fiercely. The world needs more women who refuse to accept no. Over the next few days, reality intruded on the bubble of new parenthood. Lily needed constant care, feeding every few hours, changing, soothing when she cried for reasons no one could decipher.
Maylene was exhausted in ways she hadn't known existed, her body still recovering while her mind tried to adapt to having this small life depending entirely on her.
And through it all, the lawsuit continued. Webb sent updates, depositions scheduled, documents requested, motions filed. The legal machinery ground on regardless of whether she had time or energy to deal with it. 2 weeks after Lily's birth, Morrison sent word. Wen wanted to settle. He dropped the lawsuit in exchange for $2,000 and a written statement from Maylene acknowledging that she'd left his guardianship without proper cause. He's losing, Webb wrote in an accompanying note. The contract doesn't hold up to scrutiny. He knows it, so he's trying to salvage something before we dismantle his case completely. I recommend we refuse and push forward. Rowan was ready to refuse immediately, but Maylene hesitated. $2,000 was a fortune, but it was also finite. If paying it ended this, got Wen out of their lives permanently, maybe it was worth it. The statement, Rowan said flatly. That's what he really wants. You admitting fault, giving him something he can use to justify what he did. It's not about money, it's about control, just like everything else with him. But if we give him this, he goes away. Maybe. Or maybe he takes the money in the statement and comes back asking for more in a year, because you've established that he can extort you whenever he needs cash. Rowan shook his head. We finish this. We win decisively enough that he knows coming back will cost him more than he can afford. Maylene looked down at Lily sleeping in her arms, so small and vulnerable and trusting. What kind of world was she bringing her daughter into? One where you had to fight every battle to the bitter end, or one where you knew when to compromise for peace? I want it over, she said quietly. I'm tired of fighting. I just want to raise my daughter without looking over my shoulder. I know. But giving in now means you'll be looking over your shoulder forever, waiting for the next demand. He touched Lily's tiny hand. Let's finish this fight so she never has to. The words settled into Maylene's chest, finding purchase there. He was right. Settling now would be teaching Lily that bullies won if you were tired enough, scared enough, desperate enough. That wasn't the lesson she wanted her daughter to learn. Tell Webb no, she said. We fight. Webb's response came 3 days later, full of legal optimism. The handwriting expert had examined the guardianship contract and found inconsistencies suggesting forgery. The deposition of Wen had gone poorly for him. He'd been evasive, contradicted himself, lost his temper when pressed. Webb believed they could get the whole case dismissed within the month. But Wen had one more card to play. He showed up at the ranch himself one evening, alone this time, no hired muscle or lawyers. Just Wen on horseback, riding up to the house, as if he had every right to be there. Rowan was out checking the north pasture. Tom was in town for supplies. Jack and Danny were in the bunkhouse. Only Sarah was in the house with Maylene and the baby when Wen knocked on the door. Sarah answered, putting herself between Wen and the interior. You're not welcome here. I'm not here to cause trouble. I just want to talk to Maylene. 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking. And I'm telling you to leave before I fetch the rifle. But Maylene appeared in the doorway behind Sarah, Lily in her arms. Something in her had solidified over the past weeks, hardened into resolve. She'd spent 3 years afraid of this man, then months more running from him or hiding behind others. Maybe it was time to face him directly. It's all right, Sarah. I'll talk to him. Maylene, on the porch, where everyone can see. Just 5 minutes. She met Wen's eyes. And you stay on the ground. Don't come up the steps. Wen dismounted, holding his hands out to show they were empty. I'm unarmed, just here to talk. Maylene stepped onto the porch, positioning herself where Sarah could see from the window and where the ranch hands would have clear sight if they looked this direction. Lily stirred against her chest, but didn't wake. Talk then. Wen looked at the baby, his expression unreadable. So it's true. You're a mother now. Yes. Congratulations, children are a blessing. He shifted his weight, and for the first time since she'd known him, Wen looked uncomfortable. I came to withdraw my lawsuit. Maylene's breath caught. What? The case. I'm dropping it, telling my lawyer to file dismissal tomorrow. He met her eyes. You win. She didn't believe it, couldn't believe it. This was Wen. He didn't concede defeat, didn't walk away from fights. There had to be an angle. Why? Because my lawyer tells me I'm going to lose. Badly. The contract won't hold up, the judge is unsympathetic, and continuing will cost me more in legal fees than I'd ever recover in damages. He paused. And because I'm tired. You're never tired. I am of this. Of chasing someone who clearly doesn't want to be found. Of fighting battles that don't matter. He looked at Lily again. Your mother wouldn't have wanted this. Us destroying each other over money and pride. The mention of her mother sent rage through Maylene's chest. Don't you dare speak about her. You don't have the right. She was my friend once, before everything went wrong between us. You beat her daughter for 3 years. Any friendship you had died with her. Wen flinched, actually flinched, like the words had struck him physically. I know what I did. I'm not here to make excuses for it or ask forgiveness. I'm just here to say it's over. I'm going back to San Francisco. You'll never hear from me again. I don't believe you. I don't care if you believe me. It's still true. He turned back toward his horse, then paused. For what it's worth, you were right to run. I was cruel. I convinced myself it was discipline, necessary correction, but it was just cruelty. And I'm sorry. That probably means nothing to you, but I'm sorry anyway. He mounted and rode away before Maylene could form a response, leaving her standing on the porch with her daughter and a confusion of emotions she couldn't begin to untangle. Sarah rushed out. What did he want? To surrender, to apologize. Maylene watched him disappear over the rise. I don't know if I believe him. Smart not to. Men like that don't change. But something in Wen's voice had sounded genuine, not asking for forgiveness or expecting absolution, just stating facts. Tired, defeated, done. When Rowan returned an hour later and heard what happened, his reaction was immediate suspicion. It's a trick. Has to be. Maybe, but Webb said we were winning. Maybe Wen's just cutting his losses. Or maybe he's planning something worse. Rowan paced the kitchen. I don't trust this. But the next day, Webb sent word. Wen's lawyer had indeed filed for dismissal. The case was over. Wen had checked out of his hotel and bought a ticket on the eastbound stage. As far as anyone could tell, he was really leaving. The victory felt hollow. Maylene had expected to feel relief, triumph, closure. Instead, she felt numb. 3 years of fear and months of legal battle, and it ended with Wen riding away and an apology she didn't know how to accept. You're allowed to be angry, Rowan said that night while they watched Lily sleep. Allowed to not forgive him just because he said sorry. I know. I just don't know what I feel. It's all tangled up. Relief that it's over, anger that it happened at all, grief for the time I lost. So feel all of it. Doesn't have to make sense. He pulled her close. What matters is you're free now, really free. He's got no claim, no power, no legal standing. Whatever happens next, you get to choose it. Choose. The word felt strange, powerful. For 3 years, everything had been dictated by Wen's whims. Then her choices had been limited by fear and necessity. But now, holding her daughter with her husband's arms around her, Maylene realized Rowan was right. She was free. Actually, truly free. And whatever came next was hers to decide. Freedom, Maylene discovered, was harder to adjust to than captivity had been. At least in captivity, you knew the rules even if they were cruel. Freedom meant making choices every day with no script to follow, and the weight of that responsibility felt crushing sometimes. The first month after Wen's departure, she kept waiting for the trap to spring. Every letter that arrived at the ranch made her heart race. Every stranger in town seemed like a threat. She'd wake in the night convinced she heard footsteps, only to find Rowan beside her and Lily sleeping peacefully in her cradle. You're grinding your teeth again, Rowan said one morning, touching her jaw gently. Sarah says you're wound so tight she's worried you'll snap. I'm fine. You keep saying that, still doesn't make it true. He sat on the edge of the bed. Talk to me. What's going on in your head? Maylene looked at him, this man who'd given her everything and asked for so little in return, and felt words she'd been holding back for weeks finally break free. I don't know how to just be happy. Every time I start to relax, my brain tells me I'm being careless. That happiness is just the setup for something worse. 3 years with Wen taught me that good moments were traps. Enjoy yourself, and he'd find a reason to punish you for it. So I learned to never let my guard down. She twisted the blanket between her fingers. But he's gone now, really gone. And I'm still waiting for the punishment that isn't coming. Rowan absorbed this quietly. That's not going to go away overnight. Maybe not ever completely. Trauma doesn't work that way. Then what do I do? Spend the rest of my life flinching at shadows? No. You practice being present, being here in this moment with me and Lily and this life we're building. And when the fear comes, because it will keep coming, you remind yourself where you actually are instead of where your brain thinks you are. It sounded simple when he said it. Practice. Like any other skill you could learn, but implementing it was different. Still, Maylene tried. When she caught herself catastrophizing, she'd force her attention to something immediate and real. The weight of Lily in her arms, the smell of bread baking, Rowan's laugh when Jack told another terrible joke at dinner. Small anchors to the present, pulling her back from the past's undertow. Winter came again, Lily's first, and with it a routine that slowly began to feel less like performance and more like actual life. Maylene had worried she'd be a terrible mother. How could someone who'd been raised with violence know how to raise a child with love? But Lily was patient with her stumbling attempts, and Sarah was always there with advice when things got overwhelming. "You're doing better than you think," Sarah said one afternoon while they folded laundry together, Lily napping nearby. "I've seen plenty of new mothers, and you're more natural at this than most. I feel like I'm making it up as I go." That's what all parents do. The good ones, anyway. The bad ones think they have all the answers and refuse to adjust. Sarah smoothed a wrinkle from one of Rowan's shirts. You question yourself. Pay attention to what Lily needs. Adapt when something isn't working. That's exactly what she needs from you. The words helped, but doubt still crept in during the long nights when Lily cried and nothing Maylene tried would soothe her. Those were the times when old fears resurfaced. What if she was doing permanent damage? What if her broken pieces were infecting her daughter somehow? Rowan would find her during these spirals, take the crying baby, and walk the floor with her until she settled. "You're not broken," he'd say when Maylene apologized for failing. "You're healing. There's a difference." By spring, Lily was sitting up and babbling nonsense that occasionally sounded like real words. Maylene found herself laughing more, genuine laughter that didn't feel forced or guilty. The ranch had a good year. Cattle prices were up, they'd expanded the herd, and Rowan's reputation as a fair dealer meant people sought him out. One evening in late April, Tom knocked on the door with news that shifted everything again. Letter came for Maylene, from San Francisco. Her blood went cold. When? Don't think so. Return address is a law office, but different from his lawyer. Maylene's hands shook as she opened it, Rowan reading over her shoulder. The letter was from an attorney representing Wen Zhao's estate. Estate. The word took a moment to register. Wen was dead. He'd died 3 months ago. Heart failure, sudden and unexpected. The attorney was writing because Wen's will contained a provision regarding Maylene. He'd left her his import business, the building that housed it, and $10,000 in cash, along with a letter that the attorney had enclosed. Maylene's vision blurred. She had to read the legal notice 3 times before the words made sense, and even then they felt impossible. "He left you his business," Rowan said slowly. "The man who terrorized you for 3 years left you everything he owned." The letter from Wen was written in his precise handwriting, dated 2 weeks before his death. "Maylene, if you're reading this, I'm dead. Good. I don't deserve to grow old after what I did. The business is yours. Everything is yours. I'm not leaving it to you as apology. Nothing could apologize for 3 years of cruelty. I'm leaving it to you because your mother should have inherited it when she got sick, and I prevented that out of greed and pride. The contracts are legitimate this time. The money is real. Do with it what you want. Burn it all to the ground for all I care. Just know that you won. Not because I gave you this, but because you survived me and built something good anyway. I lied when I came to your ranch. I said I was tired. Truth is, I was dying. The doctor gave me 6 months. Turned out to be less. But seeing you with your daughter, seeing you'd made a life worth living, it made me realize I'd wasted mine on anger and control. Take the business, sell it, keep it, whatever. Take the money. Use it to make sure your daughter never has to run from anyone the way you ran from me. I'm sorry doesn't cut it. I know that. But for whatever it's worth, I am. Wen Zhao. Maylene read it twice more, then set it down with shaking hands. Dead. Wen was dead. The monster that had haunted her dreams and waking hours was just gone, erased from the world while she'd been feeding her daughter and learning to sleep through the night. How do you feel? Rowan asked carefully. I don't know.
And she truly didn't. Relief, yes. But also something like grief, not for Wen himself, but for all the time she'd spent being afraid of him, all the energy wasted on fear of someone who couldn't hurt her anymore. He was dying when he came here. He knew he was dying. Does that change what he did to you?
No, but it explains why he gave up, why he apologized. She looked at the papers spread across the table. He left me his business, the one my mother helped build before he drove her into the ground. It's worth a fortune. What do you want to do with it? The question hung between them. What did she want? She'd spent so long surviving that she'd barely thought about what came after survival. But now, holding proof that Wen was gone and she was free, Maylin felt something shift inside her chest. Not healing exactly. Healing was ongoing, imperfect, full of setbacks. But a choice, a direction. I want to sell it, she said slowly. The business, the building, all of it. I don't want anything that has his mark on it. And the money? I want to use it to make sure no one else has to live like I did. Chinese women trapped in situations like mine. We could fund an organization, something that helps them escape and start over. Rowan's expression softened. That's a hell of a legacy, turning his cruelty into something that saves people. My mother used to say the best revenge is building something good from the wreckage. I think she'd like that. They traveled to San Francisco that summer, leaving Lily with Sarah and taking Danny along as translator and witness. The city felt foreign to Maylene now, too crowded and loud after months of ranch quiet. But facing Wen's attorney, signing the papers that transferred everything to her name, felt like reclaiming something that had been stolen. The import business sold quickly to a competitor. The building went to a Chinese merchant association. Maylene kept enough money to ensure the ranch would be secure through any hardship, then established a fund administered by a women's charity group, the Liling Fund, named for her mother. Its purpose? Helping Chinese women escape abusive situations and start new lives. You're going to save lives with this, the charity director said when they finalized the arrangements. Women who think they have no options will have one because of you. On the journey home, Danny was quieter than usual. Finally, as they crossed into Montana territory, he spoke up. What you did back there, setting up that fund, it matters more than you probably realize. Maylene glanced at him. You know people who need it? Knew someone. My sister. She was trapped working in a brothel, couldn't leave, couldn't ask for help. By the time I found out, it was too late. His voice cracked. She'd killed herself rather than keep living that way. The words hit Maylene like a physical blow. Danny, I'm so sorry. Me too. Every day. He stared out at the passing landscape. But knowing there's help out there now for women like her, it helps. Makes me think maybe she didn't die for nothing, if her death motivated someone to create something that could save others. They rode in heavy silence after that, each lost in their own thoughts about the people they'd lost and the ones they might save. Back at the ranch, Lily had grown impossibly in just the few weeks they'd been gone. She was pulling herself up on furniture now, cruising along while holding on, constantly on the verge of walking, but not quite brave enough to let go. She missed you, Sarah reported. Kept looking for you at dinner, getting fussy when you didn't appear. Maylene scooped up her daughter, breathing in that particular baby smell, feeling the solid weight of her. This was real. This was hers. No one could take it away. That fall, they got their first letter from someone the Liling Fund had helped. A woman named Wei, trapped in domestic service in Sacramento, had used the fund's resources to escape and relocate to Oregon. She was working in a laundry now, saving money, building a life. She wrote to thank Maylene for making it possible. More letters followed over the years, each one a story of escape, survival, new beginnings. Maylene kept them all in a box, reading them when doubt crept in, or when she needed reminding that suffering could be transformed into purpose. Lily grew from baby to toddler to small girl with alarming speed. She was fierce and curious and completely unafraid, which terrified Maylene almost as much as it delighted her. The girl would chase chickens, climb fences, demand help with everything even when she was too small to be useful. She's got your stubbornness, Rowan said one evening, watching Lily insist on carrying a bucket of water that was almost as big as she was. And your refusal to accept limitations. She's going to give us heart attacks. Probably, but she'll never let anyone tell her she can't do something. That's worth a few heart attacks. By Lily's third birthday, the ranch had grown. They'd taken on 2 more permanent hands, expanded the house to add more bedrooms, and built a proper schoolhouse for the handful of ranch children in the area. Maylene taught reading and writing 3 days a week, discovering she had a talent for explaining things in ways children understood.
You should have been a teacher, Sarah said, watching Maylene work with a struggling student. You've got the patience for it. I'm learning patience as I go. Trust me, I didn't start with it. None of us start with anything. We all build ourselves as we go along. It was true. Looking back, Maylene could barely recognize the frightened woman who'd stepped off that stagecoach 4 years ago. That woman had been surviving, enduring, waiting for the next blow. This woman, the one teaching children and managing ranch accounts and raising a daughter, she was living. Actually living, not just marking time until the next disaster. The nightmares came less frequently now. Weeks would pass without Maylene waking in a panic, convinced Wen was in the room. When they did come, Rowan would hold her until the fear passed, never making her feel weak for still being haunted. Trauma doesn't expire, he'd say. You carry it forever. You just get better at carrying it. On their 4th anniversary, 4 years since she'd arrived in Ash Creek, Rowan surprised her with a trip to Helena. Just the 2 of them, Lily staying with Sarah and Tom. A hotel with an actual bathtub, restaurants with tablecloths, a photography studio where they sat stiff and formal while the camera captured them. I want her to have this, Rowan explained, when she's older. Proof that her parents were real people who loved each other, not just the folks who raised her. The photograph showed them serious-faced, as was the style, but Maylene could see the connection between them. His hand on her shoulder, her slight lean toward him. 2 people who'd found each other against odds and built something lasting. That night, in the hotel room, Rowan pulled out a small box. I know we're already married, but I never properly asked, never gave you a choice in it, so I'm asking now. He opened the box to reveal a simple gold band. Maylene Hale, will you stay married to me? Not because a contract says so or because you had no other options, but because you want to? Tears burned behind her eyes. You're asking me to marry you when we're already married? I'm asking you to choose it. Choose me. Choose this life. Because I choose you every day, and I want you to know you can do the same. The ring slid onto her finger, a perfect fit. Yes, I choose this. I choose you every day. They made love that night with a tenderness that still surprised her sometimes. 4 years of intimacy, and she was still learning that touch could be gentle, that desire didn't have to hurt, that being vulnerable with someone didn't mean giving them power to destroy you. After, lying tangled together, Rowan traced idle patterns on her shoulder. I've been thinking, he said, about what happens if something happens to me. I want to make sure you and Lily are protected. Nothing's going to happen to you. Probably not, but we should plan anyway. I'm putting everything in your name, the ranch, the accounts, all of it. And I'm making Tom and Sarah co-guardians for Lily if we both die. Want to make sure there's no question about who she belongs to. Maylene propped herself up on one elbow. You're really worried about this. I just want you to know you're not trapped. Not by me, not by circumstance, not by anything. If I died tomorrow, you'd own this ranch free and clear. You could run it or sell it or walk away. Your choice. I wouldn't walk away. Maybe not. But I want you to know you could. That's the difference between a cage and a home. You can leave a home if you need to. His words echoed in her head for days after they returned to the ranch. The difference between a cage and a home. She'd spent so long in cages. Wen's most literally, but also the cage of poverty, the cage of being Chinese in a hostile country, the cage of her own fear. But this ranch, this life, this family, it was a home, a place she could leave if she wanted, but chose to stay. That understanding changed something fundamental. She stopped waiting for disaster and started planning for the future. They added on to the house again, making room for the siblings Lily insisted she needed. Maylene took over more of the ranch management, discovering she had a head for business that surpassed Rowan's. Together, they made the operation profitable enough to weather bad seasons without panic. The Liling Fund grew, too. By its 5th year, they'd helped over 200 women escape various forms of captivity. Some settled nearby, becoming part of the community. Others scattered across the territories, building new lives far from what had hurt them. Each letter, each success story, felt like proof that suffering didn't have to be the end of the story.
When Lily was 6, she asked the question Maylene had been dreading. "Mama, why don't I look like the other kids?" They were sitting on the porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold. Maylene's first instinct was to deflect, but Lily deserved honesty. "Because your mama is Chinese, and most of the people around here aren't. You're mixed, Chinese and white both. That makes you special. Kids at school say I'm different, that I don't belong." Rage flared in Maylene's chest, but she forced it down. "People say cruel things sometimes when they don't understand. You belong exactly where you choose to belong. You're a Hale. This ranch is your home. Nobody gets to tell you different." "Did people say mean things to you when you were little?" "Sometimes. They still do, occasionally. But I learned that what people say about me matters less than what I know about myself. I know I'm strong. I know I survived things that would have broken other people. I know I built a good life out of nothing." She pulled Lily close. "And I know my daughter is going to be even stronger than I am, because she's growing up knowing she's loved and wanted and capable of anything." Lily absorbed this seriously. "I want to be strong like you. You already are. You just don't know it yet." That conversation marked a turning point. Lily stopped trying to blend in and started embracing what made her different. She learned Chinese from Maylene, insisted on helping Danny with the horses, worked twice as hard as necessary at everything to prove she could. She was becoming exactly the kind of fierce, unbreakable woman Maylene had hoped to raise. The years continued their march. Lily at 8, then 10, then 12, growing tall and strong, more competent every season. Rowan's hair went fully gray. Maylene found lines around her eyes that hadn't been there before. Tom retired, turning over the foreman duties to Jack, who'd grown into the responsibility. Danny brought home a wife, a quiet Chinese woman named Lynn, who'd come west with her family and found work at a boarding house in town. Sarah's health began to fail in Lily's 13th year. Nothing dramatic, just the slow diminishment of age catching up with hard living. She kept working until she physically couldn't anymore, and when she finally had to stop, Maylene was there. "You don't have to do this," Sarah protested weakly as Maylene helped her to bed. "You've got enough to handle. You took care of me when I had nothing. Let me return the favor." "That was different. You were broken and bleeding. I'm just old. You're family. That's all that matters." Sarah passed quietly in her sleep 3 months later, Tom beside her holding her hand. The funeral brought out half the county, testament to how many lives she'd touched. Maylene stood at the graveside holding Lily's hand, thinking about all the ways Sarah had saved her without making a show of it. Small kindnesses that had added up to a life raft when she'd been drowning. "She was good people," Tom said after, his voice rough with grief. "Best I ever knew." "She was. We were lucky to have her." She'd say we earned each other, that good people find each other and hold on. The ranch felt emptier without Sarah's constant presence, but life continued. Lily was old enough now to take on real responsibilities, running the books and managing supplies with efficiency that reminded Maylene painfully of herself at that age. But where Maylene had learned competence through fear, Lily learned it through genuine interest and encouragement. "You're going to run this place someday," Rowan told her one evening, the two of them going over accounts. "Probably run it better than I ever did. I don't want to run it alone. Can't I just help?" "You can do whatever you want. That's the point. You've got options. Education, inheritance, skills. The world's bigger for you than it was for your mother or me." Lily looked at Maylene. "Is that true? Do I have more options than you did?" "You have infinite options compared to what I had. But that's the point. Each generation should have more freedom than the last. I survived so you could thrive. You'll thrive so your children can soar." "I'm not sure I want children." "Then don't have them. It's your life. Make of it what you want." The conversation reminded Maylene how far they'd come. She'd spent 3 years as property, years more recovering from that experience. But she'd turned that suffering into something that gave her daughter actual choice. Not survival, but options. Not endurance, but the freedom to build whatever life she wanted. On Lily's 16th birthday, Maylene took her to the place where it had all started, the stagecoach station in Ash Creek, now abandoned since the railroad had come through. They stood on the platform where Maylene had first stepped down, bruised and terrified, not knowing what awaited her. "This is where I arrived," Maylene said, 16 years ago. I was so scared I could barely stand. Didn't think I'd survive another year, let alone build a life. Lily studied the weathered platform. What would you tell that version of you if you could? That it gets better, that the fear doesn't last forever, that she's stronger than she knows and about to meet people who'll help her prove it. Maylene put her arm around her daughter, and that everything she survives is worth it because it leads to you. They walked back toward the wagon, and Maylene found herself thinking about all the versions of herself that had existed. The girl who'd lost her mother, the woman who'd endured Wen's abuse, the terrified bride stepping off a stagecoach, the new mother learning to trust, the rancher's wife who'd found her strength, each one necessary, each one building toward who she'd become. Life wasn't perfect. She still had nightmares sometimes, still flinched at unexpected touches, still had days where the weight of the past threatened to crush her, but she'd learned that healing wasn't about erasing damage. It was about integrating it, making peace with it, refusing to let it define your future. On their 20th anniversary, Rowan and Maylene stood on that same porch where she'd faced down Wen, watching the sunset paint their land in shades of gold and crimson. 20 years of marriage, 16 years of actual choice, 2 decades of building something real from the wreckage of what came before. Any regrets? Rowan asked, his arm around her waist. Maylene thought about it honestly. I regret what Wen did to me. I regret the years I lost to fear. But I don't regret anything that came after. Every hard day, every struggle, every moment of doubt, it all led here. To this life. To our daughter. To us. Even when I'm stubborn, especially when you're stubborn, reminds me I'm not the only difficult person in this marriage. He laughed, and the sound carried across the pastures where cattle grazed peacefully. Their cattle, on their land, part of a life they'd built together through choice and effort and stubborn refusal to let the past dictate the future. Inside, Lily was cooking dinner. She'd grown into a formidable cook, blending Chinese techniques with ranch provisions in ways that surprised everyone. The house smelled like home, like family, like all the things Maylene had thought were meant for other people. You know what I think? Rowan said, pulling her closer. I think Catherine would have liked you, would have liked seeing what we built here. You think about her still? Sometimes, but not with pain anymore. Just gratitude that I got to love someone that much twice in one lifetime. Most people don't get it once. Maylene leaned into him, watching the sun sink below the mountains. She thought about the scared woman she'd been, the frightened girl before that, the abused ward who'd thought escape was impossible. All of them had contributed to who she was now, scarred but intact, damaged but functional, broken in places but whole where it mattered. She'd learned that survival wasn't victory in itself, but it was the foundation everything else got built on. You survived first, then you healed, slowly and imperfectly. Then you lived, really lived, not just existed. And if you were lucky, very lucky, you got to help other people learn the same lesson. The Liling Fund was still operating, still saving lives. Lily had started volunteering with them, using her unique perspective as someone raised by a survivor to connect with women escaping abuse. She was good at it, had a talent for making people feel heard and valued. Watching her daughter take up that work filled Maylene with pride so fierce it sometimes hurt to breathe. What are you thinking? Rowan asked. That I'm glad I didn't die in San Francisco. Glad I took the risk of writing to a stranger. Glad that stranger turned out to be you. She turned to face him. I'm thinking that I'm happy. Actually, genuinely happy. And that's something I never thought I'd be able to say. Good. You deserve happiness. Everyone deserves happiness. Not everyone gets the chance to find it. She squeezed his hand. We got lucky. Both of us. We found each other at exactly the right moment when we were both ready for something real. Lily called them in for dinner and they went inside together, leaving the porch empty in the gathering dark. But the life they'd built, messy and imperfect and hard-won, continued inside those walls. A life built on choice, sustained by love, enriched by the knowledge that they'd all survived things that should have broken them and came out stronger for it. That night, after Lily had gone to bed and Rowan was reading by the fire, Maylene sat at the desk and pulled out the box of letters from fund recipients. Hundreds of them now, each one a life transformed. She added the day's mail to the collection, 3 new letters from women starting over, building new lives from the ashes of old ones. She thought about writing back, sharing her own story, but decided against it. They didn't need her story. They had their own, and each one was valid and valuable and deserving of the space to unfold without comparison. Instead, she wrote in her journal something she'd started doing years ago as a way of processing the past and documenting the present. Someday, she thought, Lily might want to read these, might want to understand exactly what her mother had survived and why that survival mattered. But more than that, Maylene wrote for herself. Proof that she'd existed, that she'd fought, that she'd won. Not in the flashy way stories usually portrayed victory, but in the quiet accumulation of days where she got up, did the work, loved her people, and went to bed grateful for another day of freedom. The Chinese woman who'd stepped off that stagecoach bruised and terrified had conquered the frontier, but not through force or dominance. She'd conquered it by refusing to let it break her, by building something good in harsh soil, by turning survival into flourishing, fear into strength, pain into purpose. She was Maylene Hale, survivor and rancher and mother and wife. She was scarred and strong, and sometimes still scared. She was proof that you could start from nothing, survive hell, and still build a life worth living. And that, she thought as she closed the journal and joined Rowan by the fire, was the only victory that mattered.